What If Volume 3 starts with 2 stories by Brian Michael Bendis, which I could feature individually, but in Bendis' fashion, neither have enough material for even a minute. In What If Jessica Jones had joined the Avengers, a young pre-detective Jessica wakes from her coma inflicted by the Avengers. Realizing their mistake, the team offer her membership, but she turned it down. However, this time Steve asks her to reconsider, and she does, joining the team and finding a family. She even gets Wanda help before her mental breakdown starts, but most importantly, she begins a relationship with Steve, ending with them marrying, and that's it. Most of the first half is taken up with a recap of the final issues of Alias, and the rest is one of the most generic stories I've ever read. Literally any other person could have filled Jessica's role. We never even see her in action. If they hadn't pointed her out, I never would have known this was Jessica. Her design and costume are unforgettably bland, weird since the writer created the character. In What If Karen Page had lived, the club thrown by Bullseye that originally killed Karen instead punctures a lung, leaving her injured but alive. Matt finds out that Kingpin sold him out to Mysterio, and blinded by rage, kills Kingpin. Unfortunately, Kingpin had hidden documents that, in the event of his death, are sent to every law office, revealing Matt's identity as Daredevil and Kingpin's murderer, and Matt is arrested on sight. Despite many heroes vouching for him at his trial, the jury finds Matt guilty and he serves 15 years at Rikers, never seeing Karen again. This is a little better, but again, very little happens, and Karen plays no role in any of this. It's something Daredevil could have originally done, but didn't. Bendis himself serves as a self-insert narrator for these, dotting the panels with tiny blue dialogue boxes that are really hard to read, especially with the muddy artwork. Yeah, I have no reason to recommend these, just go watch their shows on Disney+. What if, yeah, that's too long. Uncle Ben isn't home during the burglary, so Aunt May is shot instead. Peter goes after the shooter, but not before revealing he's Spider-Man to Ben. They both run to the warehouse where Peter discovers the thief's identity, and as he angrily screams at him, he falls out the window. Ben witnesses this, and as the police show up, he takes the blame. Peter's put in foster care, but his anger keeps him from long-term guardians, while his guilt prevents him from becoming Spider-Man, resulting in John Jameson's death. Jonah begins his crusade against the hero, finally pressuring Peter into confronting him at the Daily Bugle, where he dangles Jonah out of a window, warning him to knock it off. This awakens the darker side of Peter, and his attitude lends him in juvie, where Flash just so happens to also be bullying him at every opportunity. Peter escapes and resumes being Spider-Man, surviving on petty theft. He fights his regular villains, but a battle with Green Goblin pushes him too far and he nearly kills him. On the brink of insanity, Peter tries to break Ben out of jail, but Ben refuses to go, finally giving him the speech on the importance of power and responsibility. Peter breaks down and confesses he could have stopped the thief, but Ben tells him it's not his fault and to let go of his guilt, sending him to live with their neighbor. Where Peter semi-retires as a hero as he completes school and meets Mary Jane. Ben is eventually released and the duo form a team, Peter maturing and accepting his role as a hero. As with most Spider-Man stories in this series, this is really freaking good, easily up there with the best. The artwork's really nice, and Peter's different paths to learning responsibility is very engaging. Made all the more fun by this story being told through two friends in a comic shop making it up on the spot, one even wearing a Watcher shirt. Highly recommended and the first good sign for this new series, though I guess they forgot Peter is a wanted fugitive. What if Dr. Doom had become the Thing? During the college years, Reed discovers Doom's notes and tells him about the miscalculation. Impressed, Doom becomes Reed's close friend, splitting up his friendship with Ben. Years later, Doom replaces Ben on the shuttle and they launch. They fly through the cosmic rays where it's revealed only Doom is armored, declaring his intentions to eliminate the other three and take all the credit for himself. They crash back to Earth where the team manifests their powers, and it turns out Doom's armor is faulty as it's absorbed a large dose of cosmic radiation, turning Doom into the Thing. Doom Thing insanely blames Reed for everything and fashions a crude costume before knocking Reed out and flying away with him toward a nuclear testing site where Ben and Bruce are about to test gamma radiation. Reed is dropped into the middle of the field and Ben rushes to the rescue, getting him to safety right before being hit by the explosion. Doom Thing attempts to kill Reed, but it's revealed Ben is now the Hulk, and the two bulky super beings battle it out. Doom Thing is knocked out, and an out-of-control Ben Hulk starts attacking the other three. But Reed manages to appeal to his human side, and Ben reverts to normal. Reed asks Ben to forgive him for abandoning him, realizing Ben was tethered to reality, and promising he'll find a cure for him. Doom Thing escapes for future conflicts, and the team become the Fantastic Four. This is another really good one. I love how natural and character-based the dialogue is, letting the story flow smoothly without the need for narration boxes. The art is detailed and colorful, and the expression work is top-notch, and a surprising amount happens within the small time frame this takes place in. Another I highly recommend, and I really hope we do see Doom Thing again. What if, again that's too long, Gabriel and Xavier convince Eric that what he's doing is no different than the supremacists he's fighting against. Thus he changes his tune and founds the X-Men with Xavier, their partnership also ushering in more stable relations between human and mutant kind, and Xavier never becoming paralyzed. Though the numbers are small at the Institute, as Xavier has never found a way to reliably detect mutants. Sad Xavier and Eric analyze a comatose yet telekinetic Jean Grey, and Kitty Pryde shows a visiting McCoy and Rasputin around, and Logan and Mystique ambush a mysterious truck convoy that suddenly launched a barrage of missiles at an unknown target, who turn out to be the Sentinels sent by Trask that begin their attack on Xavier's compound. The heroes unite and fight the robots, but the Colossi are too powerful for them, when suddenly a giant phoenix appears out of nowhere and incinerates every single foe. The group is summoned to the medical bay where Gina is awake and holding a passed out Xavier. Later, the team gather to determine their next course of action, also learning they can use the trackers from the Sentinels to build their own mutant detecting system. But the threats of the Hellfire Club and the Marauders loom over Xavier and his crew, so to prepare for the dangers ahead, Xavier begins the X-Men. I haven't liked most of the X-Men comics I've looked at, but this is one of the best What If X-Men stories I've read. Yeah, not a lot happens, and I wish Eric had more of a role since he's mostly in the background, but the artwork and dialogue are very well done, with even some funny moments, and there's a great sense of hope and humanity to the story. Something missing for most of X-Men's run. It's not as good as the last two, but it's a thoroughly enjoyable read, though how many times is Magneto going to decide he's a good guy? What if General Ross had become the Hulk? Ross is the one who rushes to get Rick off testing grounds, while Igor takes the opportunity to gas the compound. With no one delaying the explosion, Ross is irradiated and becomes the Hulk, inadvertently crushing Rick with his new form. Hulk Ross's mind is confused and nearly feral, but he retains recognition for his daughter as he attempts to return home, only for his reflection to scare him off. Igor attempts to flee with the stolen plans, but Ross recognizes his own car and throws both into a gas station that ends the spy. As Ross tries to regain sense, the army appears and begins barraging him, Ross unable to communicate with them and fleeing the scene. The army continues to hound him and he fights back, realizing he's become the powerful enemy-scaring weapon he's been dreaming about. He goes back home to try talking with Betty again, only to find she's been crushed by one of the tanks he threw. The shock turns him back into the Ross, and a nearby Bruce takes the opportunity to shoot him before he can do more damage. I feel like I've just been repeating myself, but this is yet another great story with great artwork and dialogue. And while tragic, it also feels a bit cathartic to see Ross as the hunted down Hulk. Like, hey, how does he like it, huh? And it closes this volume on a much better note than it opened on, with a nice reappearance of the long-absent Watcher, and yes, it is amusing reading this in the world where Red Hulk now exists. Waha is a comedy take on the formula, in the same vein Campaign is issue 34 of volumes 1 and 2. As with those issues, this is comprised of short spoofs of the series, and most of them are funny. There's What If the Fantastic Four all made it to the moon, where they eventually realize they can't survive without oxygen. There's What If Black Panther were actually white, where he unmasks and the Avengers fire him because they thought he was a diversity hire. And there's one that replaces Peter Parker with Hulk, where Jonah dares insult his photography, and this black panel leaves little to the imagination. There are a couple with more topical humor I didn't immediately get, like this dig of Mark Millar and Brian Hitch that apparently references the duo frequently missing deadlines, and some are just plain weird, like where a more ultimate universe has everyone as kids, I guess suggesting that only kids could think it could be more ultimate. And this one that asks what if Wolverine was in Pokemon but then shows a character from Yu-Gi-Oh, and I can't tell if that's the joke or ignorance. There are even a couple funny digs at DC, like presenting their own version of Identity Crisis, or saying the day they get to do a Batman Daredevil crossover is when hell freezes over. Though that does actually exist. I think this other shot of Mark Millar is too mean-spirited, suggesting he tanks Marvel's epic imprint, when Marvel was the one who entrusted an edgelord comic writer with a teenage romance story. But my favorite joke is where they ask what if Stan Lee wrote Ultimate Spider-Man and they just start reprinting the original origin story. This was a lot of fun, sitting proudly next to the other farcical issues in the series, so I think we can all agree the only way to go out is on Galactus getting food poisoning. What if Captain America fought in the Civil War starts off volume 4. In an alternate history, Corporal Steve Rogers joins a Union regiment commanded by Colonel Buck Barnes. They massacre the population of Jackson County, giving Steve a look into what war truly is and how corrupt his commanding officers are. And when Steve is ordered to murder a group of children, he steals Buck's horse and sends the children away on it, being shot by Buck for his trouble. He's caught in the raids of fleeing horses and dragged for miles, but is saved by an all-Native American Union regiment. He nearly dies of his injuries, but Wilson, one of the soldiers, performs a ritual that imbues him with the spirit of the Eagle Chief. During the ceremony, Steve's regiment arrives and Buck breaks down the door, with the spirit's intensity burned off his skin, turning him into a living skull. The entire fort is massacred, but the ritual finishes and Steve emerges as a living embodiment of freedom, complete with a shield that can summon the vengeful spirit of an eagle. And with his might and virtue, he ends the Civil War, saves President Lincoln, and spreads the ideals of Native Americans. But Buck, who apparently became immortal, forms a supremacist group, White Skull, who Steve's descendants defend the country from to the present day. Yeah, I don't like this one. I appreciate its message, but it's another one of those stories presenting white people as evil who must be humbled by the natural ideals of the oppressed indigenous people, a harmful worldview that we really need to move past. It also doesn't feel like much happens, and I'm not a fan of the sketchy artwork, and why do they have to do Bucky dirty like this? It's just a story without much substance besides its preachiness, and you can skip it. Still better than when they did this with Batman, though. So what if the Fantastic Four were Russian cosmonauts? In an alternate history where Stalin began the space race, a test shuttle with 4 cosmonauts fails and plummets back to Earth. The crew, comprised of Natasha Romanoff, Peter and Ilyana Rasputin, and a Soviet version of Reed Richards named Rudian, are found to have absorbed intense cosmic radiation, giving each similar but different powers to their main universe counterparts. Becoming the ultimate Federalist freedom fighters, they spread the ideals of the Soviet Empire across the globe, but refuse to kill unarmed civilians. Rudian meets with his estranged father, who's a political prisoner, telling him goodbye before the ship to Cuba. They're confronted by the Avengers, led by the descendant of the Steve Rogers from the previous issue, who proved to be a match for the team. And it's revealed Peter's mind is degrading while his bulk is increasing. Rudian turns up Giant Man's controls to maximum, seemingly killing him, and his falling body nearly crushes everyone. Ilyana is saved at the last minute by Captain America, and she uses the distraction to try to kill him, but the rest of the team, surprised by the Avengers' heroics, stop her and the gun backfires, killing her. Rudian teleports the team back to Russia, where they confront the Soviet leaders about how they lack honor before Natasha vaporizes them. The remaining team become the new leaders of the USSR, reforming it into a republic where equality is guaranteed for all. This is okay, I just don't feel like there's much story or character. The team are founded, they fight across the world, and the Avengers encourage them to turn against their communist masters. The new powers are interesting, I just wish we saw a clear view of them in action, and that the panel layouts weren't so hard to read. It's a fine passive read, but if you want this idea with more substance, check out Superman Red Sun. What if Prince Namor of Atlantis grew up on land? Fen takes the last for her husband, and the couple escape to Hawaii, where Fen gives birth before passing on. Namor grows up on land, resenting his Atlantean heritage and feeling like a freak, but his father tells him he has nothing to be ashamed of. Years later, Namor is introduced to his grandfather, King Thakor, who tells him to come home and accept his royal duties. Namor attacks the king, but the fight is cut short by the Pearl Harbor bombing, where his dad is killed. In his fury, Namor attacks the Japanese squadron, revealing his powers to the army, who induct him into special forces, partnered with the original Human Torch. Despite the uneasiness the other soldiers have around them, the duo do everything they can for the war, but during one assault, Torch is taken down by missiles and never found. Much later, Namor is summoned to the North Atlantic, where he finally encounters Atlantis, and finds that it's been taken over by Nazis, who followed in the example of Namor's parents and crossbred with Atlanteans to create a master race and subjugate the original inhabitants. And that they're using Human Torch to power a cannon that will melt the polar ice caps and flood the world. An uprising begins, and Namor is ordered to use Torch to destroy Atlantis, but he defies orders and blows them up on land. The Atlanteans emerge victorious, but just to be safe, the army nukes Atlantis. But Namor somehow survives, and it doesn't look good for the surface world. This is pretty good. The plot feels rushed, but you do get a sense of how Namor feels living on land and how uneasy he is, but how he's trying to make it work, as well as his shock when he realizes what his influence in abandoning his undersea home has led to. And I like that he had a friendship with Human Torch instead of the two historically being enemies. Artwork's great, writing's great, yeah, recommended. And be sure to check out the original What If issue 41 for a similar and also good Namor story. What if Daredevil had lived in feudal Japan? In mid-19th century Japan, a retired Ronin refuses to further serve the giant shogun, so his messenger of the owl blinds the Samurai son, Mashiro. The shogun promises to restore the child's sight if the Ronin will massacre everyone aboard the western ship carrying guns, where this universe's Matt and Foggy keep watch. The Ronin silently kills everyone aboard the ship, except for the traitor's Greek ambassador, who escapes with the giant shogun, and for Matt, who blows up the ship, destroying all the stock, but also killing Foggy. The Ronin returns to the shogun and demands he heals his son, but is killed by his forces, who also kills the ambassador as his life for good measure. The shogun samurai Stick adopts and trains Masahiro, who somehow has heightened senses that make him untouchable, and Stick uses his influence to get this devil who dares into the shogun's close circle, where he also meets Elektra, the daughter of the ambassador, who serves as a geisha, but also secretly fights the shogun's forces. Giant Shogun learns of Stick's treachery and has him poisoned, and Masahiro and Elektra retaliate by attacking the shogun, who's traveling in the emperor's convoy. Giant Shogun escapes, and the duo nearly catch up with him, but they're impeded by a western sharpshooter named Bullseye, hired by the shogun, who seemingly kills Elektra. Giant Shogun orders Bullseye to also kill Masahiro, but he turns out to be Matt, who heard the shogun admitting to being behind the Bolt massacre and doesn't lift a finger as the devil who dares throws Shogun into a volcano. Elektra turned out to only be Grays, and the two marry, with the emperor opening the country to western influence. This is an interesting story, even if we never find out why this Daredevil has his powers, but I really don't like the artwork. It looks like they took real photographs and put a million filters over them, making both foremost very muddy and hard to even look at. And most of the dialogue doesn't fit in the word balloons, like they had to replace all the wording. If you can look past that, then this is worth a read. And does anyone else feel like they're taking a shot at Batman here? What if Thor was the Herald of Galactus? Galactus decides to feast on Asgard, where the heroes, including Thor, fight valiantly against him. Steve is killed by a female surfer, and Thor returns the favor. Galactus devours enough of the realm to sate his hunger and bargains that if Thor becomes his new herald, he'll leave Asgard alone. Thor agrees, leaving his hammer behind, and becomes Galactus' defender against any who oppose him from devouring their worlds, but intentionally seeks out warfaring species that shouldn't have a place in the galaxy. Odin's Raven tracks Thor down and tells him that Asgard has fallen. Thor defies Galactus, who reluctantly allows him to return to Asgard, where it's shown that Loki and the Frost Giants had taken over. Loki reveals it was him who encouraged Galactus to devour Asgard to destroy Odin and get Thor out of the way. Thor recovers his hammer and destroys the Frost Giants before also summoning Galactus to finish off Asgard, since there's nothing left of the world's former glory. Thor frees his friends and tells them to flee to Earth, where he rejoins Galactus and finding worlds for him to devour. This was the most fun out of this volume. It's not as deep or compelling as the other issues, but it's exciting with a good sense of scope and cartoonish but easy to follow artwork. And since it was a short one, I might as well add that all the issues in this volume are bookended by genius teenagers who have discovered these stories through hacking into the internet of alternate universes, one of whom goes under the Watcher moniker. And while I always prefer the actual Watcher as narrator, this is a cute and creative send-up. As for the story, this is a good read, and apparently is also the universe where Hellboy is a frost giant. What if Wolverine was Public Enemy #1? Logan is a furrier working in 1920s Canada. He goes to a saloon run by his friend Gerard, who offers to give him the place if he'll help smuggle a large amount of booze into Prohibition-era Chicago. Logan declines, even after finding out he's fathered a child with one of the prostitutes, but that night the place is burned to the ground by the gang lord Scarface, killing everyone inside. Logan goes to Chicago looking for answers and is saved from a hit by a man named Mateo. They track Scarface to the Metropole Hotel, where they cause enough of the distraction to give Logan enough time to get to Scarface's suite, where he's met by a legion of paid-off police officers. He's chained up and brought to Scarface, who turns out to be this universe's version of Dog Logan. He gets ready to kill Logan, but it's revealed Logan had also planted a large amount of dynamite under the hotel, which goes off and levels the hotel. Logan survives, and with Mateo's help, starts to clean up Chicago. This is an alright closer for the volume, with probably the best artwork out of these issues. My problem is that the title is a lie, as Logan doesn't become Chicago's most wanted, at least not in the story itself. And I don't know why it's a Wolverine story when it's obviously taking a Punisher-inspired route. I guess Marvel's right, all comics do need to include Wolverine. What if the Scarlet Witch hadn't acted alone begins Volume 5? At the end of Avengers Disassembled, Carol and McCoy rummage through the destruction, trying to piece together exactly what happened. Feeling something's wrong, they both visit Pietro to see if he knows anything, then go see Strange to get his viewpoint, only to find he was never at the fight. Who they saw was actually another of Wanda's illusions, confirmed by how that Strange said that there's no such thing as chaos magic, while the real one knows there is. He reveals Wanda's been channeling the magic power of death, first of Hank and then Clint. McCoy ponders why Wanda did all of this and who helped her, only to find she's been working with Steve, who she fell in love with and had been seeing behind Vision's back. The Avengers and X-Men band together to take the duo down, but they're caught, where it's also revealed Wanda was never insane, it was just a cover, and that Wanda and Steve had decided to kill all heroes to harness the magic brought by their deaths and bring utopia to the world. Starting with Xavier, who willingly sacrifices himself, Wanda begins her magic, but Rogue stops her, siphoning her power, but the distraction causes Wanda to lose control, wiping out all heroes not in her immediate area. Sam and Tony reveal to Steve that his serum and being frozen have damaged his mind and made him come up with this idea, thus it convinces Wanda to destroy them both, and McCoy says it's all his fault. I don't know what to think of this. The first half is one long recap, and the second feels like one big slap in the face. I don't follow this era of the Avengers, so maybe there was something in there about Wanda and Steve, but the revelation that Steve was the crazy one feels like character assassination, and I hate that it suggests that McCoy was wrong and not let Wanda kill the heroes. While the artwork is incredible, I don't think I can recommend this one, though it might have worked if it was Agatha all along. What if Spider-Man had rejected the spider? During the event The Other, Peter rejects his spider side, and he never emerges from his physical and mental cocoon. Thus, the Venom symbiote detects his peril, detaches itself from its current host Mac, and makes its way to Peter, where after a battle of many months, completely takes over Peter's body and mind. The being, calling itself Poison, barges into the Avengers Mansion, where Aunt May and Mary Jane are staying. He tries to kill Mary Jane to use her as a shell to reproduce himself, but Logan and Luke Cage intervene. Poison proves to be a match for them, so Mary Jane volunteers to go with him if he leaves them alone, but vows that she'll do everything she can to make his life hell. Poison leaves her alone, but not out of compassion, as he seeks someone who won't fight back, so he goes to the cemetery and digs up Gwen Stacy's corpse, putting her body through a similar metamorphosis, and that's the end. Yeah, this is a very short story, padded with some honestly beautiful but numerous oversized panels, though what we got was interesting. And very dark, almost on the same level as issue 88 of What If Volume 2, and I do like Peter David's eloquent writing. Yeah, this is worth at least one read. That makes me wonder what it would look like if a sonic weapon was used on this thing. What if Wolverine was never deprogrammed? During Enemy of the State, Logan is never freed of Hydra and the Hand's mind control, thus he goes on a killing spree, brutally murdering most of the world's heroes and horribly maiming Steve. With very few of them left, Steve recruits Magneto, Sue, and Kitty Pryde to trap Logan in a hidden bunker, outlining the plan to bring him down once and for all, but instead of entering through the planned doorway, Logan tunnels under the bunker and kills Sue. Magneto tries to paralyze his adamantium skeleton, but Logan's too strong for that and kills him too. Steve holds out as long as he can, but falls to Logan as well. Kitty tries as hard as she can to reason with Logan while keeping herself transparent so he can't harm her, pointing out how many heroes he's killed, but she finally realizes he's a lost cause. So as a final resort, she puts her hand through his head, which he instinctively slices off, fusing it with the inside of his skull and seemingly finally killing him. And I guess she dies from blood loss because Fury and Elektra come in to clean up and talk about her like she's past tense, revealing she was their final weapon all along. Well, this was depressing, but still interesting, and a good chapter that would fit within the event, with some very creative strategies on the hero and villain sides. It is in love with hard-to-read two-page spreads, but I got the gist of it, and I guess it's as close as we'll get to Wolverine kills the Marvel Universe. What if Legion had killed Xavier and Magneto? The Time Traveler seemingly kills both mutant leaders, giving Apocalypse almost no opposition. Most mutants join Apocalypse, so some flee to the Savage Land as Apocalypse exterminates or subjugates the rest of Earth's population. Decades later, Scott and Jean are training their telekinetic son Nate when Apocalypse's forces suddenly attack. The couple barely get their son away in time before they and everyone else are vaporized, Soren flying Nate into a frozen wasteland before nearly dying of exhaustion. Luckily, Logan arrives and takes them to a resistance group led by Brother Voodoo, who's now Sorcerer Supreme. The group trained for an upcoming assault, but splinters begin to form as Nate and Owen vaporize some of Apocalypse's scouts, much to Steve's anger. The next day, the group march on Apocalypse's lair, only to be held back by Holocaust and Spider-Man symbiote clones. The group fight valiantly, but Ben, Soren, and Peter are killed, forcing Voodoo to open a portal the remaining heroes escape into. But before Voodoo can open one to Apocalypse's chambers, Dormammu confronts the heroes, Voodoo staying behind as the heroes escape, but Nate takes the Eye of Agamotto with him. While the remaining heroes fight the four horsemen, Nate and Owen confront Apocalypse, instantly liquefying him, and with the Eye, Nate gets ready to turn back time and prevent Xavier Magneto's death. But Steve can't risk him potentially destroying all of existence and uses Thor's hammer to kill Nate before setting off with Logan to hopefully rebuild the world. And it's revealed the lightning strike Steve sent for Nate that passed through the portal is what killed Xavier Magneto in the first place. It's yet another apocalyptic X-Men story, and I'm just so done with these. But I'll give it credit, the writing and art are good, the fights have life to them, and Nate's character arc is interesting. It's worth a look, and I guess Dormammu was in no mood to bargain. What if Xavier's secret second team had survived? A new team of X-Men led by Vulcan are sent to rescue the original team from the living island Krakoa, but all but Scott are dead before they get there. Vulcan attacks the island's mind, which sends a wave of radiation over the heroes that drastically increases their power levels, which they use to send the island into space. Xavier marries Mariah soon after and retires from leading the X-Men, passing the reins to Vulcan, who has used his power and Xavier's help to create many more teams of heroes and greatly strengthen human-mutant relations, becoming the most celebrated heroes on the planet. After a TV interview, Vulcan returns home to find Xavier, Scott, and his team waiting for him. Silver Surfer found Krakoa floating in space and brought it back to Earth, where the time-powered Sway scanned it and discovered what really happened. Vulcan arrived in time to save all but Jean Grey, but when he tried to save her anyway, he ended up vaporizing her. Knowing he couldn't let this get out, he killed all the other witnessing X-Men to keep a secret. Vulcan tries to kill the present team as well, but Sway time freezes him and Darwin removes his powers, while Xavier finds Vulcan has also killed many other innocents in fits of rage. As punishment, he's banished to Krakoa, where he's surrounded by nothing but memories of his former glory, and to get food, he's forced to relive that terrible moment over and over again. However, every time he's forced to watch, he becomes more and more dead to shame and empathy. This is one of the best X-Men stories I've ever read. The artwork is fantastic, the writing is incredible, and I love the interview format most of it takes, followed by the gut punch of a twist ending. Greatly recommended and a great Volume 5 closer, though I can already tell you I have no chance of winning this contest. Volume 6 kicks off with an issue dedicated to Planet Hulk. In the first story, Hulk saves his wife Queen Karaya before the warp core explodes, this time killing him. Meek is also killed in the aftershocks, and a furious Karaya absorbs the remaining life from the planet before traveling to Earth. They shatter the moon before using Black Bolt to disintegrate Strange and the Sentry. And before anyone can react, they also kill Iron Man and most of the Fantastic Four, X-Men, and Avengers. Kairi is talked out of destroying the planet, instead enslaving it to create an enormous Hulk statue, which years later is complete and she turns to stone in its palm, never to move again. In the next story, the ship actually lands at its intended destination, where nothing threatens Hulk and he slowly calms down and gets used to his surroundings. He reverts back to Bruce, nearly getting eaten by the nightlife, and uses ingenuity to construct a shelter, but when trying to hunt the wildlife as food, he angers Hulk, who tears down his work. He literally beats himself up before the split personalities come to an agreement. Much later, Bruce has built a proper homestead and even a radio, while Hulk has built a paradise where small lizard-like creatures are protected from giant predators. And millions of years later, that species has evolved into sapient beings who worship Hulk as a god, with Hulk still alive and protecting them. Finally, there's a joke story where Banner arrives on planet Sakaar and is immediately skewered by the inhabitants. And every year, a new hero shows up to find them, only to also be immediately impaled. Due to my love of survivor stories, I enjoyed the second one the most, but all three are entertaining in their own ways. And considering how stupid the heroes acted during this event, seeing them shish kebabbed in the final story is cathartic. What if Annihilation reached Earth? Thanos is killed by Drax before it can save Galactus or Silver Surfer, who in the process triggers an explosion that kills all of them. Thus, at the very end of the Civil War event, the events of Annihilation reach Earth, with Nova telling the heroes of all this. So the heroes call truce and prepare for the incoming invasion. The first wave results in an immense amount of damage and casualties, but with some help from the humans, the planet manages to repel the invaders. But the incoming following wave is even greater and threatens to end everything. In desperation, the heroes plead with the Watcher, who, while he can't interfere, does introduce them to the Terminus device, which will very briefly open a portal that will draw everything in its vicinity through it. The Inhumans trick Annihilus towards the device on the moon, then everyone evacuates, all except for Nova, Steve, and Tony, who stay behind to defend the device while it powers up. The portal activates and draws Annihilus and his entire fleet through, before self-destructing and taking the heroes an entire moon with it, which forms a ring around the Earth. And thus can the remnants of heroes and humankind begin rebuilding. Not a lot of story, but the scope is immense, with a lot crammed in each panel. To the point it's worth owning just to go back and see what else you might catch during multiple read-throughs, and it's nice to see, even to the end, Steve still holds to his ideals. What if, yeah, this one doesn't have a title, instead of Xavier, Vulcan is thrown into the Macron Crystal during the downfall of the Shi'ar Empire, where he absorbs its power and becomes the Phoenix Force. He takes the Phoenix power other heroes possess, then uses it to vaporize Xavier and others he blames for everything, before then turning on the entirety of the Shi'ar system. But he doesn't stop there, consuming multiple galaxies and leaving quite a few Watchers out of work. Alex and Rachel somehow managed to escape to Earth right before the Shi'ar were destroyed, and with the help of Cable and Scott, they return to the space island of Krakoa, where Vulcan is waiting for them. He nearly kills them, but the Phoenix Force reacts negatively to him using it in hate, giving the heroes an opening to attack. Once he's weakened enough, Rachel telepathically speaks to Vulcan, telling him to let go of the Force before it consumes him. They say he's already accomplished everything he set out to do, and now he has to stop before it gets worse. And with the emotional support of his family, Vulcan banishes the Phoenix at the cost of his life, but it turns out he's been absorbed into the Phoenix, where Jean Grey is waiting to help him recover. This was okay, kind of a more chill story than last two, even given the astronomically high body count. It's just nice seeing heroes be human and trying to help others on an emotional level. I'm not a fan of the panel structures, but I could read it just fine. Needless to say, I liked the last story with Vulcan better, but this is a fine read. Though what does an out-of-work Watcher do? What if Civil War begins with the Watcher meeting Tony at the cemetery where the assassinated Captain America is buried, and revealing other outcomes the event could have had? First, the extremist injection Tony was forced to take ended up killing him, meaning that when the Superhuman Registration Act is passed, Skyrich is put in charge of seeing that the heroes comply, while Steve goes to all heroes, getting the majority to take his side. But as soon as the deadline hits, Skyrich unleashes the Sentinels on the group, killing most of them. He insists it was just faulty programming and releases a new line of Sentinels commanded by Rhodes. The remaining heroes gather in a new safe house where Steve believes if Tony survived, he would have been on their side. Thus, he puts on an Iron Man-like suit and the team battle against the Sentinel forces, only to stop when Steve finds they're piloted by young soldiers. Fearing they're becoming the enemy, the heroes go underground, which gives the villains a chance to run wild, killing the new Sentinels. Thus, Skyrich unleashes an army of Thor clones to take down hero and villain alike. Rhodes attempts to negotiate a ceasefire with Steve, but Skyrich breaks his up and kills the two, and the popularity gets him elected president. In the next story, at the event conclusion, Tony is even more honest with Steve, thus Steve doesn't disable Tony's armor, but an operative notices the trap and releases the clone of Thor, which attacks the heroes, but Tony leaps in the way of the blast that would have killed Goliath. Steve defends Tony while his armor repairs itself, and the heroes take down the Thor clone. Steve and Tony finally have a chance to talk again, and Tony suggests Steve oversee the Registration Act, have him be the only one who knows everyone's secret identities, and use the Avengers to keep the heroes in line. He agrees, and Tony proclaims it to the nation, ushering in a new era of trust and unity. These were really good, the second one especially given how bleakly the event ended. The artwork has some goofy moments, but it's still very nice, worth a read, and the bookends remind me of the original series issue 35. What if Spider-Man vs. Wolverine? Following the events of that story, Peter, guilt-ridden that he accidentally killed Logan's friend Charlie, is stopped from returning to the States by Logan, who gives him a chance to rescue Charlie's sister Alex. They're attacked by KGB agents and the Russian superhumans Bora and Dynamo, and despite Peter's best efforts not to kill anyone, he accidentally does Dynamo and helps Logan eliminate Bora. They free Alex and they all hide out with the Russian agent trainer Nebo. Peter stays to make sure they're safe, during which time Nebo helps train his abilities, and Peter becomes comfortable with his new surroundings, including beginning a relationship with Alex. The four become a mercenary team and they take on contract work, with Peter's innocent sense of morality starting to fade, letting things slide he originally wouldn't have. Eventually, Peter gets tired of protecting Alex from Russian agents and takes the battle to them, eliminating anyone tied to Alex's past, raising tensions between Russia and the USA. Nebo is captured by Fury and Natasha, while the other three are ambushed by Russian operatives that they barely get away from, Peter even shooting one of them. They find themselves surrounded, only for the SHIELD helicarrier to fly in for the rescue. The team trade Nebo in exchange for forgetting all about Alex, and Fury tells the three he wants nothing to do with them, and thus Peter, Logan, and Alex continue to hunt down Black Ops groups and makes the world safer. This was interesting, a very different path for Peter to take, and probably the most grown up I've ever seen him act. Problem is, now he's just a cold-hearted mercenary with none of the crack-wise attitude he's famous for. He's no Deadpool is what I'm saying. Also interesting that they chose a then 20-year-old comic not a lot of people read to be a what if. I wonder if this was written for the older series and it just never got its chance. Whatever it is, it's a fun read, though you'd think Peter would know how to keep his writing on the paper. Like, what if this was a Fantastic Four? Skrull Agent Delilah is much more lethal when she battles the Fantastic Four, killing all but Ben, who loses his powers. Thus, at the funeral, the temporary team of Spider-Man, Hulk, Wolverine, and Ghost Rider are urged to be made permanent by Steve and Ben. They think it over, with the Baxter building looking appealing, but their clumsy fight against Super Skrull and not-so-great press coverage brings more doubts. They accidentally activate a portal to the negative zone, freeing Blastar, who they manage to subdue, but with more bad press following. Doom is furious a new team has taken on the name and works with an unseen presence to take them down. Peter and Johnny are ambushed by Sandman, who, as Johnny points out, is amplified by the demonic power. And when the rest of the team show up, they face off against the more powerful Frightful Four. The villains nearly win, but they're suddenly incinerated by Doom, possessed by Mephisto, who's been giving occult powers to the villains. Mephisto nearly does the heroes in, but the righteous tears of the crowd nullify his powers, giving Peter an opening to use a disruptor and stun their shared nervous system. And in a moment of coherence, Doom decides he doesn't want to be conquered and disintegrates himself. The team finally get the recognition they deserve and decide to stick together. This is pretty good, though I like the last time this was tackled a little bit more, since that showed just how in over their heads the team were. I wish we saw them interacting more, since one of the best attributes of the Fantastic Four was their family dynamic, but I'm happy they took on this role and found a way to work together and earn respect. This is also notable as the last work of Mike Wieringo, who died soon after starting, and it was finished by volunteer artists and inkers, so it deserves a read to see all this talent on display. And it's a good wrap-up for Volume 6, even though they somehow got Johnny Blaze confused with the then-current Ghost Rider Danny Ketch. What if House of M starts off Volume 7? At the end of the event, instead of no more mutants, Wanda declares no more powers. Thus all superhumans with biological or mystical abilities are completely stripped, the consequences hitting everyone differently. S.H.I.E.L.D. decides not to investigate, and the former heroes go their separate ways. However, tech-powered heroes and villains are still active, as shown with Iron Man having to single-handedly take down a number of villains looking for the Cosmo Cube, which reveals itself as Red Skull uses it to kill several heroes. Tony begs Maria Hill to let him form a new team of heroes, but she refuses. Red Skull unites AIM, Hydra, and the Hand under his rule, then destroys S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Fantastic Four and takes the Baxter building as his main headquarters before declaring himself ruler of the world. But he's opposed by Tony and his own team of Iron Heroes, and the battle is brutal, with both sides decimated. Even the remaining X-Men don't turn the tide, with Red Skull using the cube to suck the life around him, and soon Tony is the final hero alive. But he's saved by a surprise appearance by Peter, who takes the cube and smashes it. He declares that the world needs to stop waiting for heroes and be the heroes, and rallies the civilians around him to charge with Red Skull and his forces. And 30 years later, Peter and Tony reminisce on old times and wonder if there will ever be heroes again, with Peter's granddaughter showing signs of enhanced abilities. This feels like the Marvel equivalent of DC's Act of God, though not as inane as that series was. It feels silly that all these heroes would just give up on everything and go back to normal life, but it is good to see Tony being proactive and forming a new team. I wish this was longer and we got to see more heroes' reactions, but as is, it's decent. And always good to see Peter moving on with his life. What if Fallen Son? Following the end of Civil War, Steve is not assassinated and he's found guilty and sentenced for opposing the Superhero Registration Act. As Tony gives the news in a press conference, the nephew of the slain Goliath uses his own powers to crush Tony in revenge, and his loss bolsters support behind the registration. Heroes become more militaristic and government dictated, with Skyrich taking control of the training initiative, while indoctrinated heroes hunt down those opposed to the act. Red Skull Lucan absorbs Stark Enterprises into his Cronus Corporation, also terminating Pepper Potts' employment and beginning production on mass-producing Iron Man war suits. A large funeral service is held for Tony, where his body is launched into space as multiple heroes watch, including Steve, and it's revealed without Tony, the Skrull's infiltration and succeeded and their secret invasion has turned into a full-scale invasion. As you can tell by how short that sum up was, there's really not much story to this. Sectioning it into the stages of grief was clever, but it just feels like a sequence of bullet points with the comic saying this happened then this happened. The artwork's well drawn, but very muddy and unappealing to look at, with solid color filters slapped across entire pages. This issue's not awful, I just can't come up with a reason to read it. And so boring, I can't come up with an end stinger. What if newer Fantastic Four? In the sequel to last volume's Fantastic Four story, the new team fight against Kang when the blip occurs, erasing half of all life, including Ghost Rider. Tony steps in to complete the team as they work to settle the chaos of the new universe. Adam Strange and the Silver Surfer all appear to warn the team of Thanos when suddenly they're teleported to meet the Mad Titan. He demonstrates his power by separating Hulk and Bruce, then prepares to destroy them, but Mephisto points out his ego is turning death off from him, thus he returns everyone home. The mystical heroes try to convince the team to help them, but they refuse to blindly obey a plan the heroes refuse to explain to them. The team then start working on their own plans, studying Reed's old research and using his portal to take their own fight to Thanos, who's demonstrating his might to the cosmic beings. Logan appears to defect to Thanos, helping him vaporize Silver and even convincing him to erase Mephisto, taking over as advisor. He tells the rest of the team he's realized the futility of their fight and hopes that by allying with Thanos he can make Jean Grey love him instead of Scott, and the team leaves disgusted. Tony brings the armor of a Celestial back through the portal and with some tinkering takes complete control of it, powering it with the energy of the negative zone, but despite a lucky punch, Thanos blows it over. Logan asks if Thanos has ever given Death a loving touch, finally convincing him to become intimate, and in the distraction, slices the glove off. Peter uses it to reverse all Thanos has done before banishing Thanos and handing the glove to the Watchers. Bruce also stays with the Watchers as a researcher as the other heroes continue their work on Earth. This was a lot of fun, even better than their last adventure. I love Logan's strategy and how the heroes managed to save the day without the mystical heroes plan. Great story, worth a read. Also bonus story with a comedy take on World War Hulk. What if Spider-Man Back in Black, instead of Aunt May, the sniper shoots Mary Jane dead? Peter tracks down the sniper and forces him to reveal his employer, but even after he tells him it's Kingpin, Peter, blinded with rage, kills the sniper, and the exchange is picked up by the Kingpin through a phone call. Shocked by his actions, Peter rants to Aunt May, telling her to go to the Avengers before deciding he has to end Kingpin, who, from his prison cell, has managed to convince S.H.I.E.L.D. to transfer him. Peter tries to stop him, causing Tony to intervene, but Peter manages to distract him by telling him Kingpin murdered Mary Jane and knocks him out. S.H.I.E.L.D. then tries their hand at taking Peter down, but he knocks them all out and focuses on Kingpin, only for Tony to recover and continue the fight, incapacitating Peter for a few minutes. He confronts Kingpin, but realizes he can't take action against him. Peter recovers and goes after Kingpin, but Tony stops him again. He realizes Peter won't stop and tries to take him down for good, but Peter exploits a flaw in his armor and depowers him. He follows Kingpin to an airport where he's about to flee to Europe, but Kingpin reveals he's holding Aunt May hostage, threatening to kill her if Peter doesn't let Kingpin beat him to death. Instead, Peter punches straight through him and gets the guards to back off. Aunt May is horrified at his actions, and Tony and the police arrive to arrest him for murder, where Peter surrenders, content in the knowledge that whichever way his trial goes, he did what he had to do. Yet another really good Spider-Man what-if story with some great artwork and fantastically choreographed fight scenes, and gives a well-balanced viewpoint for everyone, where nobody's right and nobody's wrong, and is a fairer depiction of justice than the entirety of Civil War. What if Secret Wars? Near the conclusion of the event, Doom, who has absorbed the power of the Beyonder, is this time warned that the Beyonder still exists within Claw, and Doom vaporizes him before they can reclaim the power. Doom then focuses on Earth, using its godlike powers to broadcast a message urging the world to join him in unity, while also broadcasting images of the destruction across the universe that will follow if they don't. The heroes who weren't killed on Battleworld don't buy it and attack, but Doom takes them all down, using his powers to permanently defeat them without killing them, while rubbing it in Sue's face, who is the one that encouraged them. He reshapes the world in his image before doing the same to multiple empires across the universe. He creates the Infinity Gauntlet, wielding such power that he travels to Hell itself and frees his mother's soul from Mephisto. He then eliminates the Celestials, but it takes so long and so much energy that it destroys his gauntlet and drains him of nearly all the Beyonder's powers. He finds that their cosmic struggle has knocked Earth off its axis and caused permanent winter, so with the last of his power, he sets the rotation right, and a now mortal Doom rejoins humanity. This is very interesting. Most of the first half is taken up with a long recap of Doom's history, so I was ready to not like this one, but the scope of the rest made it worth my while. The artwork is unbelievably good, nearly every panel a masterpiece, and while not a lot happens, the size of everything is so massive it feels like it did. Definitely worth checking out, even if it shamelessly borrows its format from Dr. Manhattan's monologue in Watchmen. What if Runaways? Technically this was a backup story split into parts for each previous issue. When Iron Lad activates Vision in the far future where all heroes are dead, the Avengers failsafe program targets the Runaways as candidates, thus Iron Lad travels back and recruits them as the Young Avengers. While thwarting a bank robbery by the Wrecking Crew, Molly is injured and the team retreat. They heal back at base while discussing the events that led them to this point and wondering if they can defeat Victor, the young version of Victorious, the villain that will destroy all heroes in the future. And it's revealed Iron Lad is Victor, working with his future self to intentionally try to get them killed, and that they've captured the real Iron Lad. Gert catches them and attacks, but the duo are too powerful and try to kill her, only for Chase to take the dagger and seemingly die instead. Nico and Carolina then join the fight, and the burst of temporal and magical energy get the attention of Kang, who shoots Victorious down. Victor and Victorious recover, and the Runaways join Kang in fighting them, but Victorious manages to kill the original Iron Lad, which, since he was the younger version of Kang, causes Kang to vanish. Molly finally joins the fight, knocking Victorious out of their base. Chase recovers and put on Kang's armor, healing his injury, and they give Victorious the beating of his life. But he's still too strong and incapacitates them. Before he can kill them, Victor has a change of heart and stabs Victorious through the head, finally ending him. Victor travels to another time, vowing to never become his future self, and the Runaways continue as the Young Avengers. This was also a lot of fun. I don't follow the Runaways, but they seem like an interesting group with their own personalities, and this makes me want to read more. What else to say but a good end to Volume 7. What if House of M also starts off Volume 8? Emma doesn't mind White Gwen when she witnesses Peter recovering his memories, thus Gwen ends up at the same area as the main heroes when Wanda destroys the House of M universe. Everyone in the area has returned to the main continuity, including Gwen, who's rightly confused that she's part of Wanda's universe and doesn't recognize this reality. Peter, still reeling from the life he lost, continues his role as an Avenger when Sentry and several villains disappear. A group of villains band together to take advantage of the weakened Avengers who are busy discussing other odd anomalies occurring in their world. world. Meanwhile, Gwen is researching her new world when Strange appears and tells her she's the reason for the glitches, that she technically shouldn't exist and needs to go before things get worse. Gwen refuses and witnesses a massive fight between heroes and villains where Aunt May, Jarvis, and Mary Jane are killed. Reality crumbles away and Gwen accepts she has to go to save everyone, but Peter sacrifices himself to save her and it ends with the white light erasing everything. Next, Peter takes Hawkeye's arrow that was meant for Wanda and is rewarded by Wanda allowing his House of M wife and son to exist in the regular universe. He introduces them and explains everything to May and MJ, but his actual wife is clearly not happy with it. He tries to split his time between his two families, but the relationships become heavily strained to the point May tells him he has to make a choice. MJ is attacked by the Green Goblin, despite Norman still being in jail, and Peter decides to stay with MJ. He takes her to a cabin for their anniversary, where it's revealed he also retained his mental breakdown from House of M, becoming the Green Goblin. But as he's about to kill her to remain with Gwen, a sudden flash of sanity causes him to jump in front of his glider, killing him instead, and years later his son Richie ponders if he should take the mantle of Spider-Man. These were interesting, though I wish the first one was the full story and we got to see more of Gwen in her new world, but both are entertaining and worth a read, though more importantly, Aunt May gets to be a spider hero again. What if Secret Invasion? Captain Marvel accidentally destroys the Skrull ship Reed had infiltrated, killing him, thus he never creates the device that turns the tide of the Skrull invasion, and Earth is conquered. The world celebrates cross-species unity, with humans put seemingly willingly through a process that turns them into Skrulls, including Aunt May and Norman Osborn. While most heroes rebel and live in Wakanda, the only territory not under Skrull rule, Logan smuggles in a virus lethal to Skrulls, and the heroes work to make a reverse human-Skrull conversion. They appear to succeed right as Wakanda is invaded by superhumans loyal to the Skrulls, and a battle begins. The cannon to disperse the cure is destroyed, but Thor uses a hurricane to sprinkle it across the planet, where it's revealed is still lethal to Skrulls, killing nearly the entire world population. Norman had been masquerading as Iron Man, and thanks to Peter, was able to get full access to the virus, where he sabotaged the vaccine to eliminate all Skrulls. Enraged, Captain America decapitates him, and the group are arrested for terrorism. In the next story, Norman becomes suspicious that the world is suddenly seeing stable peace. He contacts Tony, who tells him to search for an answer in the Savage Lands. He takes his Thunderbolts team, eventually finding a large Skrull vessel, where they're attacked by seemingly every hero on Earth that killed the Thunderbolts. Thinking they've been brainwashed by S.H.I.E.L.D. nanobots, Norman releases his gas to disable them, only to find they're all Skrulls. This time, Queen Veranke listened to the prophetic warnings of the cleric, thus their invasion remained hidden, slowly replacing heroes and other important figures to ensure dominance, including Norman, who also possesses the Prophet's DNA, but the transformation is unstable and he continually thinks he's Norman. He refuses to listen and shoots himself, proving it's true, and another Skrull steps up to inherit Norman and the Prophet's essence. These were interesting, and I'm glad we finally saw what the invasion would be if it actually was a secret invasion, including replacing Marvel's own editorial staffs. What if World War Hulk? Sentry fails to calm Hulk, thus with access to the satellites regained, Reed and Tony ordered a concentrated laser burst to finally destroy Hulk. Unfortunately, the array malfunctions and causes a much wider burst that incinerates the city, including all present heroes and the disguised Skrull Queen. Without her guidance, the Skrulls begin a full assault on the Earth, eliminating nearly the entire population and almost all superhumans. Months later, Vision finds Bruce still alive in the radiation of the ruined New York City. Bruce just wants to die, but Vision explains the world needs him and they arrive in time to stop a Skrull ambush on some of the few surviving humans and heroes. Despite their doubts, the other heroes welcome him and begin to turn the tide against the Skrull armies. Unfortunately, it turns out Jan is a Skrull spy who uses a formula to cause Hank to grow and explode, wiping out the entire rebel base except for Hulk. Much later, Hulk uses Reed's device to summon Silver Surfer, demanding he bring Galactus to consume the new Skrull capital. Silver agrees and Galactus consumes Earth, but leaves Hulk alive to become his new herald, wiping his mind and turning him into the World Breaker. In the next story, Thor decides to leave his work in Africa early and learns about Hulk's rampage while on the plane in New York. Thor and his posse make their way to Madison Square Garden, where he tells Hulk to stop. Hulk instead chooses to fight, and a great battle commences between Hulk and Thor and their teams. However, their fight is put on hold as they find civilians trapped in the subway and they work to get them out. The pause allows them to calm down and relate with their losses, and the two teams call a truce. Sentry arrives but quickly gets the memo, and thus Hulk and his team leave for parts unknown while the heroes rebuild New York. I liked these with their differing tones and how very likely its scenario would be in this universe, and even here, me can't get away with his crimes. What if Daredevil versus Elektra? Instead of Elektra's father, the police mistakenly kill Matt during the hostage situation. Matt is laid to rest, but a week later his body is discovered by Fury to be missing, and he becomes the one resurrected by the Hand. Years later, S.H.I.E.L.D. agents Elektra and McBride investigate the assassination of Bullseye and Kingpin. They go to a nearby bar for information where Stick tells them about the Hand and to interrogate Kingpin's lawyer. When he hears about the Hand, Fury tells Elektra to drop the case, but she rebels, going to Kingpin's lawyer Foggy Nelson, who's married to Karen Page. He tells her Kingpin recruited him straight out of school to defend him from multiple charges, including assassinating Ben Ulrich, but he reveals he got tired of working for corruption and betrayed Kingpin to the Hand, also revealing S.H.I.E.L.D. as his own mole. Elektra beats it back to the helicarrier, only to find it swarmed by the Hand, where she witnesses Fury decapitated by a masked Hand agent, who turned out to be a possessed Matt. Elektra and Natasha survive the helicarrier's destruction and make their way to Stick, where they're trained under his tutelage before they gather their own martial arts team to resurrect the Chase. They ambush the Hand in Japan, where Elektra also finds Matt. After a fight where she tries and fails to bring Matt to her side, she uses a sonic disruptor to distract him before impaling him, but with his dying breaths, he reveals he's free of the Hand's control. This is a shorter one than the last few, but it's a chance to catch my breath. The artwork is a little sketchier and muted than most of the latest issues, but it's still easy to read and make out what's going on, with some gorgeous fight scenes and colors shining through when it needs to be colorful. Story's basic but compelling, and I like seeing where everyone ended up at this different timeline. Nothing too deep, but a fun read, and I'll take this take on Archie over Riverdale any day. Like, what if Astonishing X-Men closes Volume 8? Jean does not die in the event that separates her from the Phoenix, thus it's Jean they rescue from Ord and who's prophesied to destroy Breakworld. Most of the team welcome her back, but some, including Emma, are wary due to how many times she turned evil, and that Ord's world will stop at nothing to destroy her. It's also revealed Emma is working with Xavier's evil twin sister Cassandra, who wants to use Phoenix to escape from the prison holding her physical form. They track down the three women embodying the Phoenix and transfer their powers into Emma, turning her into the Phoenix and destroying Ord and Breakworld. Jean senses the world's destruction in the presence of the Phoenix, and the X-Men run out to see Emma. She kills McCoy before Jean uses her abilities to try to separate Emma from Phoenix. She's knocked back, and Sword shows up to contain the situation. Scott stops him from killing her, and as Scott proclaims his love for Emma, Jean uses the distraction to separate Emma from Cassandra's influence. They immediately rejoin, but Emma finds the strength to keep her at bay just long enough for Kitty to to rip her heart out. Unfortunately, Kitty is killed in the following Phoenix Blast. The Phoenix is contained by S.H.I.E.L.D., Logan trades new recruits, and Cassandra's mind is shown to still exist. In the next story, during the time the Danger Room gained sapience and became a villain, Ultron intercepts a signal it's broadcasting and meets it right after it kills the present team, finishing the job by killing the mutant children, knocking Xavier out with a psychic trauma. The two see the potential in union, thus they share the programming that they use to kill the remaining X-Men. The Mega Sentinel arrives with Xavier, whom Danger taunts before Ultron kills him too, and with all threats to their existence gone, the three fly to conquer the universe. I never followed the original stories, but these were interesting. I like the first best, but the second is exciting and a good volume closer, though it is painful seeing the young Kitty go through a phase. What if Iron Man Demon in Armor begins Volume 9? Tony is assigned as Doom's college roommate, and while he's very annoying, he also proves helpful, pointing out the miscalculation in Doom's formula. Doom enlists his help in constructing a device he claims will give people telekinetic abilities, but once built, Doom reveals its mind-switching machine, which he uses to transfer his mind into Tony's body. Tony in Doom's body has his memory wiped clean and returns to Latveria in poverty, while Doom in Tony's body heads Stark's empire, even killing Tony's father to take complete control. However, Tony's spirit and intelligence still remain in Doom's body, thus he works hard to pay for his education and finally receives a doctorate, also creating technologies that make him and Latveria wealthy and prosperous again. Eventually, his business even threatens Doom's enterprise, so Doom sabotages it using a prototype Iron Man suit, but Tony meets him wearing his own prototype Doom suit, and the two battle it out, Tony emerging victorious. Doom reminds him of the night they switched minds and offers to switch them back. However, Tony recognizes that his former life has been dragged through the mud, while the name he's taken is once synonymous with hope and progress, thus he vows to continue doing good as Doom. This is one of my absolute favorites. It's shorter, but I love how their personalities clash in the paths they take as each other, especially how Tony turns his life around after he's reduced to nothing. I like how their armors are the colors of their main universe counterparts despite wearing each other's outfits. And with how overproduced the artwork's been for most of these issues, it's nice to see a more traditional aesthetic without a billion filters over every panel. It's just a nice break from the numerous event-centric what-ifs that comprise most of this look. Highly recommended, though now I want to see Tony Doom fight Doom thing. What if Wolverine father? Logan returns much sooner to see the Winter Soldier kill his wife Itsu, thus he kills him, then performs a cesarean section and saves his unborn son. Time passes as Logan raises his son John in remote Tibet, trying to teach him peace and staying away from heroics. John discovers a goat one day, but that night it's reduced to bone. Logan tries to ignore it, but soon an X-Men helicopter finds his retreat, with Xavier introducing himself and asking him to join his team. Logan refuses, but his son becomes suspicious. Years later, John nearly kills a local village boy, and Logan leaves him to do all the farm work for a few weeks while he goes somewhere. John and a village girl named Indira start to have a thing, only for Sabretooth to finally hunt down Logan's hiding place, pushing Indira off a cliff before preparing to really hurt John. John reveals he also has retractable bone claws, but Sabretooth's healing factor saves him and he pushes him over the cliff as well. Logan returns and kills Sabretooth, also finding John's disappeared, but not before he massacred the nearby monastery. John travels to Tokyo, where he becomes hired muscle for a crime boss, later taking over himself and adopting the name Daken. And that's who Logan is finally forced to confront years later. He pleads with them to return, but seeing the monster John's become, is forced to use the Muramasa blade to kill him, before killing himself out of guilt. This was depressing, showing that Logan will never find happiness in any universe where he reproduces, and that his offspring are just destined to become bad seeds. The story and artwork are fine, it's just not a story for me. Also, John seems quite thin for picking an entire goat clean. What if Spider-Man Grim Hunt? At the end of the event, Peter ignores Madam Web's warnings and kills Kraven the Hunter, before going after the rest of the Kravenoff family. Peter returns home and vows to give up being Spider-Man to be with Mary Jane. However, news spreads fast about the massacre, and when MJ confronts him about it, he instead gives up on being Peter and leaves. Later, Peter is living on the streets when MJ tracks him down and begs him to come back. Peter does, but only after a news broadcast reveals he's killed Norman Osborn. He tries to argue he did it to keep him safe, but MJ tells him he should have never become Spider-Man, thus Peter abandons that life as well and instead takes up Kraven's mantle as a hunter. Years later, the new Madam Web leads an assault on the now villainous Peter, but he stabs her, and with the last of her power, she brings Anya into the fight, forcing her to become Spider-Girl to combat Peter. Peter nearly shoots her, but she turns the gun around and blasts Peter's eyes, blinding him. Peter begs her to end him, but she instead brings him back to New York, where he lives blind and alone while Anya becomes the city's spider hero. This is pretty good, another alternate end to an event I haven't followed, so I'm unfamiliar with things like how he lost his spider sense or why Antelope are running free around New York. I wish we could have seen more of him being a hunter, as it just jump cuts to that part of his life and being defeated, and what exactly did taking him back to New York accomplish? Also, not much of a fan of the sketchy muted artwork. The story's not bad, it's just not one of the greats most What If Spider-Man stories are, though cute appearance by Goofy, indicating Marvel's then recent acquisition by Disney. What if Dark Reign? Clint breaks in to assassinate the power-mad Norman Osborn, and this time uses an arrow powerful enough to pierce Norman's force field, killing him. He's seen but manages to escape, and Hammer declares him public enemy number 1. The Avengers soon hear of Clint's act and scramble to find him, while the news reports on the importance of superhero registration and even threaten to reveal secret identities to the public. Barbara finds Clint hiding in Central Park and confronts him about his actions, reluctantly agreeing with him and giving him a fake identity to escape with, but he's tracked down by Bucky and Peter. Meanwhile, an extremist news reporter plants explosives in a hotel where he heard Clint was staying, threatening to blow it up if he doesn't give himself up. Clint arrives and tries to talk the reporter down, but ends up shot, and in the aftermath, Hammer declares they'll keep everyone safe from masked vigilantes. This is okay, just short and predictable. I feel like we've seen very similar stories to this, even in this retrospective. The artwork's very nice, I like the blue and yellow tinting, but the panels are oversized and don't allow for much story or even action. It's okay for a cursory read, but you'll forget you read it in a week. Also, are these sound captions indicative of the helicopters or what's going on inside the hotel rooms? What if Venom and Deadpool? Deadpool is hired by Galactus to assassinate the Beyonder for replacing his backside with MODOK. He tracks him down, but is drawn into his partying and instead hangs out with them. As they cruise in his flying car, Peter attacks Beyonder for the events that led to the symbiote attaching to him, but singer Billy Ocean blasts him through the window, causing the symbiote to detach and Peter to fall to his death. The symbiote re-enters and attaches itself to Deadpool's head, which suits him just fine. Years later, Beyonder gets bored and leaves to find himself. In response, Venompool tells Tony to aim, then tries to join several hero groups, but is turned down due to his hairstyle, which the clinging of the bell tower finally rids him of. He tries being a hero, but gets no attention. A police officer tells him to join the latest Secret Wars event, but he's shamed by a fanboy sentry and leaves in disgust. He goes back to trying to assassinate Beyonder, only to find he's dating his former symbiote hair, and on a talk show reveals she's pregnant, where Galactus announces he's the father, leading to him and the Beyonder brawling it out to destroy destroying Earth. Thus, Venompool uses the retcon Expungifier to erase both from existence and reverse their actions. A hit movie is made of Venompool's story, but he's not happy other heroes are still getting attention, thus he kills them all and takes over the world, plastering his face everywhere so he's inescapable, but he still feels unfulfilled. He realizes he has to dedicate himself to becoming a better person and feeling good about himself, so instead he races the entire universe. This was a lot of fun. Obviously, it's a comedy story presented with the trademark humor his comics are famous for, and it's one of the funniest Deadpool stories I've read. And I recommend you read it too, if just for the ever-changing watchers. What if issue 200? Yep, we finally made it. First, instead of joining Norman during the events of Siege, Ares attacks him and Sentry kills Ares. Thus, Sentry has more than enough energy later to take on all the opposing heroes, killing most of them and conquering Asgard. Emma and Doom manage to escape back to Utopia, where they formulate another plan. Later, Loki, Namor, Emma, and Doom teleport to Asgard, where they reveal to Sentry that it was Bullseye, now operating as Hawkeye, who killed his wife. The effect is more than they counted on, as he kills Bullseye but loses all sanity as he sees himself to Dark Sentry, who kills the remaining group before turning on Norman's group, then the world, and eventually the universe, while that reality's Watcher can only watch. In the next story, Stan Lee presents a universe where Uatu broke his oath and killed Galactus. Other Watchers instantly appear and demand he stand trial, taking the Fantastic Four and Silver Surfer with them. Despite Reed speaking on his behalf, the other Watchers find Uatu guilty and sentence him to death. Later, the team infiltrates Uatu's prison, but Silver, demanding retribution, attacks the heroes as the other Watchers watch. They intervene and modify Uatu's sentence, so instead of death, Uatu takes Galactus' place. We then get a retrospective of What If, with some interviews and a list of prominent Marvel staff's favorite stories, with Ed Brubaker and Brian Michael Bendis' choice of the Frank Miller written issue 35 of the original series being reprinted to close the issue out. I don't care for the first story, especially since I'm getting tired of the omnipotent being destroys everything plot we keep seeing in the series, but Stan Lee's contribution is worth reading, and it's nice to see a tribute to the series and what it meant for many comic writers and artists, with the interview with Roy Thomas being required reading. Overall, great milestone issue, and nice to see how long the series has lasted. What If Avengers vs. X-Men? Unlike the previous volumes, Volume 10 is a miniseries detailing an alternate path for the event. The Phoenix Force destroys the Guardians of the Galaxy on its way to Earth and potential host Hope Summers. Meanwhile, Magneto trains Hope in Utopia, preparing her to receive the Phoenix while the Avengers arrive to take her into custody. The X-Men refuse to give her up, and in the commotion, Logan accidentally kills Storm, Magneto blowing up the Avengers ship in retaliation. The surviving Avengers get to shore, where a full-fledged battle nearly breaks out with the groups, but they notice Emma, Magneto, and Hope have abandoned them to intercept the incoming Phoenix Force. Thor confronts the Phoenix, but even he's no match for its power, leaving him adrift while it heads for the moon, where it meets Magneto's group and possesses Hope. The Avengers arrive and plead with Hope to let them help, but she sends them back to Earth. Magneto persuades Hope to use her power to cleanse the world of non-mutant life, and even Emma realizes the danger, telepathically telling the X-Men about the situation, who team up with the Avengers to stop Hope. T'Challa fires a missile at Hope, but she deflects it and blows a large chunk out of the moon. As a last resort, T'Challa crashes his ship into the group, but it fails, and Hope tires of Emma and kills her too. They destroy all satellites and rain moon fragments down on Earth, causing massive destruction before appearing before the remaining group. They fight, with many heroes dying, but Hope starts to lose control of the Phoenix, so Magneto kills her and takes the Force for himself, destroying nearly all remaining heroes. Xavier manages to briefly blind him, allowing Hulk and Logan to finally kill him, but the blast of energy wipes out all sapient life. However, Logan is reborn through the Phoenix, and he and Jean start to recreate life on Earth. This was a lot better than I thought, though very padding considering I just summed up 4 issues. The artwork is some of the best, and the ending's bittersweet, with some unexpected twists. It's a good read, and easier to follow than the main event. What If Age of Ultron? Volume 11 focuses on different histories depending on who's affected by the ripples from Logan's time traveling. First, Janet dies, thus Hank pours his anger into developing Ultron into something to replace humanity, which it does, eliminating everyone in only a few days. Years later, Hank is the only survivor, seemingly being left alive for the amusement of Ultron. But after he attacks Ultron, it's revealed Ultron has slowly been turning Hank into an android, using his human experiences to finally create the most superior of all Ultron. Next, Tony dies, giving Stain control over Stark Enterprises and Iron Man tech, killing most heroes in the Armor Wars. Years later, Logan and a new Ghost Rider ambush a shipment of Iron Man armor, but Logan is knocked out before he can grab it. They recruit Peter and Hulk and travel to the Savage Land to stop the armor factory, where Stain is using Trask's descendant to power the armor, and killing him or destroying the factory will mean everyone's death. Thus, Peter detaches the main armor mold, creating a distraction but dying in the explosion, and the remaining heroes gather at his grave to honor him. Next, Thor dies before defeating the Midgard Serpent, thus the monsters of Asgard invade Earth. The remaining heroes fight off a giant wave of frost giants before taking a large amount of weapons from Doom's castle and facing the Serpent themselves with a legion of Doombots. As they distract the Serpent, Natasha grabs for Thor's hammer, but it doesn't respond, but when she sacrifices herself to save the other heroes, Mjolnir deems her worthy, and she uses the power to defeat the Serpent and his forces. Next, Steve dies soon after defrosting, thus the nation loses its greatest symbol and becomes a ruin under martial law. The remaining heroes find Frank and offer to turn him into the new Captain America, which he at first refuses, but is soon convinced. They replicate the Super Soldier Serum and launch the reborn hero on the world, where he becomes a new sign of hope and strength, leading the world into a golden age, and even launching an entire legion of AmeriCorps soldiers. Frank eventually retires, his identity only known by a girl named Ava, who, bolstered by his legacy, also becomes part of the Corps. Finally, Hank is hit by a wave that completely erases the idea of Ultron from his mind. Meanwhile, the Ultrons from the first issue detect the tear in the multiverse causing the ripples, and uses it to invade the other universes covered in this volume. Time starts tearing itself apart across all the worlds, while the previously featured Logan, Avon, and Natasha band together to form a team under the Ultron-less world's Janet. However, the android Hank regains free will and tells the heroes to escape through the tear, telling them the worlds are collapsing and that their only hope is to take his. Thus they head through the tear and smash the machine, keeping it open, leaving them in a world empty of Ultron, but also empty of life. These were all exciting. Issue 2 is my favorite, and I like that they're readable without having to know much about the event or major continuity. I wanted to like the ending and call it a perfect way to top things off, but it's anticlimactic and rushed, with the heroes just all of a sudden together and knowing each other. And I don't know what the 4 of them hope to accomplish on a completely lifeless planet, but the other issues are fine, so just read those, I guess, and issue 4 is better than the last time Frank became Captain America. What If Infinity? Volume 12 mostly focuses on different outcomes from different points in the event. First, Steve allows Thanos and his forces to join the Avengers in being back the Builders, and the combined teams turn the tide, with some members even finding camaraderie with the Mad Titan. Steve still doesn't trust him, but he shelves his doubt after his hesitation gets Gladiator hurt. As they fight through the Builders' command ship, Steve discovers the reason for the the team up was so Thanos could find and eliminate his son, and Thanos kills them all. He claims Steve was killed by the Builders and leads the Avengers to victory, and later takes Steve's place in the team proper. Next, the heroes who went into space are all defeated by the Builders, forcing Black Bolt to side with Thanos and use the new Inhumans he awakened to fight off the invaders. Thanos rules Earth unopposed, but thanks to Black Bolt's loyalty, the Inhumans are allowed a haven free of Thanos' order. Later, the Inhumans search for and eventually find a weapon that will end Thanos and his rule, but Thanos and the Black Order also hear of it and attack the group. Most are killed, and the weapon reveals herself to be Dazzler, who uses Black Bolt's ultrasonic abilities to create an extremely powerful laser that vaporizes Thanos and his forces. It's also revealed Black Bolt killed the remaining Avengers to ensure a truce with Thanos, and an enraged group of Inhumans splinter to form their own Avengers to one day rise against Black Bolt. Next, the Builders are defeated, but at the cost of Earth and seemingly everyone on it, while remains of the X-Men float aimlessly through space, looting derelict ships, when one day a ship bearing the last of the Avengers appears and docks with them. The mutants are at first thrilled to discover that more heroes survived and start to catch up, but Rachel discovers they're being mentally controlled by Supergiant, and the teams attack each other. Cannonball and Sunspot cause an explosion big enough to sever the link, and Sam takes the opportunity to locate and kill Supergiant. The two teams join together to create a new X-Men and search to rebuild their world, with Sam as their leader. Next, at the end of the event, the Illuminati manage to secretly imprison Thanos, but Rocket hacks into the Iron Man suit and discovers what they did, as they head to Earth and steal Tony's armor, which Rocket repurposes and uses to infiltrate and stun the Illuminati. The rest of the Guardians fight off the team while Rocket frees Thanos, and the Guardians and a number of heroes they convince to help stop Thanos once and for all. They threaten all of Earth to never go into space again, and the cosmic heroes celebrate their victory. Finally, during the events of Dark Reign, Norman learns of the Infinity Gauntlet and, with an army of supers, hunts down and seizes all the gems. He creates his own gauntlet and uses it to destroy any who opposed or could oppose him, easily taking over the world and even trapping Peter in a time loop to forever relive Gwen's death. Unsatisfied, he plucks his abusive father from the past and shows him all this to gloat to the man who thought him useless, even rewiring his mind when he still gets no appreciation. They return to Norman's empire to find his army slaughtered by Thanos, who demands the glove back. They fight Thanos, telling him he'll never find love and satisfaction, and Norman kills him, revealing he doesn't care as long as he has power. But distracted, also wipes his father from existence, realizing too late that without him, he also never existed, and vanishes along with him. There are some really good ones in this volume, with the X-Men being my favorite, while the Guardians one is funny and exciting, and Dark Reign has a great scope and lesson about the perils of absolute power and ambition. The other two aren't bad, but don't really stand out, but everything is worth it for this regular show reference. What if Flash Thompson became Spider-Man? Yes, again. In this opener for Volume 13, Flash is at the demonstration where he is bitten by the spider. His life mirrors Peter's early career, but he's much rougher and successful, stopping the thief and embracing his celebrity status, including praise by Jonah, who now supports superheroes after his son's death made him question the abilities of traditional law and order. However, Flash's career goes down the toilet, and he's soon living in a trailer park, while his heroics become more violent and he's seen as a public menace. Peter is still a photographer, and Uncle Ben is alive, but Aunt May is dying with no available cure. He uses a tracker to find Spider-Man, amazed when it turns out to be Flash, and begs him to find the stolen cure for May, but Flash, believing Peter is the reason everyone hates him, accidentally kills him. Shocked by his actions, Flash tries to make up for it by going after the Master Planner and the cure, roughing hoods up until he locates the base, where the planner turns out to be Doc Ock. The ensuing fight brings down the building, and in an event mirroring Amazing Spider-Man 33, Flash comes to terms with himself as he lifts a tremendously heavy load off himself, literally and figuratively. He realizes he's not a hero, but maybe he can learn to be a good guy, as he gets the cure to May, then turns himself in for murdering Peter. This is pretty good, one of the better ones we've seen through this recent look, and another example of how the Spider-Man stories are some of the best in the series. I just feel like it's held back by modern comic traditions, especially oversized panels taking up most of the already reduced page count. I wish we saw the events leading up to Flash attending the convention and more of his life and career, but I guess what we got was fine, and overall is an enjoyable read. Also, say hi to Nick Fury as the Unseen, who since he killed Uatu is filling in for the Watcher for this issue. What if EXE-Men? In this variation, the world is almost completely linked through neural cyberspace, with anyone able to bypass most of the lockouts dubbed the EXE-Men, who are seen as dangerous by those who seek to control the digital world. Xavier meets with Cable and Domino in real life and tries to convince them to save Eric from the Nimrod virus threatening to reprogram his mind. They at first refuse, but agree when Xavier explains he's dying and can't do it himself. Domino enters cyberspace while Cable protects the two from real-world threats. Domino draws Nimrod out and fights the virus, damaging it long enough to infiltrate Eric's fortress. But Eric reveals he created Nimrod as a distraction so he could finish a device that will rewrite the DNA of all who log in and give them the EXE gene. He starts to kill Domino, forcing Xavier to enter cyberspace and confront Eric, seemingly killing him, the strain also killing Xavier. However, as the two wake up, it's revealed Xavier has downloaded his mind into Eric's, taking over his body, and with his new form, recruits a team of EXE-Men to defend the less fortunate from the cyber oligarchies. While this was short, this is a surprisingly very fun read, with some great world building and a clever reimagining of the X-Men in a cyberpunk setting. Very Elseworlds-like. I honestly wouldn't mind seeing an entire series around this concept, in a similar vein to the X-Men 2099 world. Though they need to change the name, as every time I say EXE-Men, I die a little inside. What if Peter Parker became the Punisher? When Peter finds the burglar that killed Uncle Ben, he kills him with his own gun, the event captured by a Daily Bugle photographer that just so happened to be on the scene. Peter continues his career as normal, but more violently than usual, though still trying not to resort to killing. However, Green Goblin's appearance makes Peter realize he needs to step things up, creating a wrist gun and an arsenal of bullets that he uses to slaughter the Sinister Six. He semi-retires Spider-Man, focusing on completing high school and later college and forming relationships, only venturing out to take care of the big fish, which also scares crime into hiding. Goblin remains Peter's deadliest enemy, but as in the main continuity, he manages to subdue him and suppress his villain identity, nullifying the threat that would mean Peter would have to kill him. But Goblin comes back and kidnaps Gwen, and Peter is forced to shoot him, also saving Gwen. Peter confesses his identity to her before retiring it to focus on their relationship. Yeah, this one doesn't work. The dramatic narration sounds silly coming from Peter, and he never shows any of the Punisher's traits. No reaction to the fact he's been killing high-profile villains in cold blood, which you'd think would severely mess up the mind of a college student who's never had to see conflict. It just feels too safe, like they didn't want the image of Peter tarnished, so they give him Punisher's life but none of the consequences. And Frank becomes a Punisher anyway, so what's the point? I guess it's clever the comic subtly hints that Peter is technically responsible for Frank's family dying as he didn't take responsibility to stop street crime, but nothing comes of it, so it's a waste of points. This almost falls into so bad it's good territory for how ludicrously the idea doesn't work, but that still makes it not a great story. Just check out the previous What If featuring the Punisher and the symbiote for a better take on this idea. What if Marvel Comics went metal? A Marvel intern is instructed to show the Latvian black metal band Hassenweld around the offices. While warned they're evil occultists obsessed with death and black magic, they seem to be pretty normal people and huge Marvel fans. They request to have their blood mixed in with the printing ink and they're taken to the printing room, where instead of the droplets the higher-ups expected, they slice themselves open, dumping a large amount of blood into the ink that prints the latest issue of Ghost Rider. They then perform a ritual that strips them of their flesh and turns them into a large demon that consumes everyone in that section of Marvel, and the intern turns out to be Robbie Reyes, who turns into Ghost Rider, then pursues the truck carrying the cursed Ghost Rider comics, which is also being driven by a demon. Unfortunately, the truck crashes and its contents fly out to the reading public, where it's revealed the band are servants of an evil god who has written a story so powerful it's altered reality itself, ending life and turning the world into an eldritch abomination. Thus, Reyes is the only one left to stop the elder god. Oh, this was freaking amazing. It's obviously tongue-in-cheek and made for fun and laughs, but it provided both. I wish we got to see more of Reyes in action, especially since Ghost Rider is one of my favorite heroes, but again, what we got is good enough. Little confused what reality this is taking place in, as it's Marvel Comics, yet Reyes and Latveria exist. I don't know, maybe it's the same universe where the original Marvel staff became the Fantastic Four and all the printed adventures were actually true. But whatever it is, it's unarguably a very fun read, and obviously inspired by that time the band Kiss actually did mix their blood into their comic. What if Thor was raised by frost giants? In this fight against the giants, Odin is slain and the race conquers Asgard, imprisoning Freya and a young Thor. Loki takes pity on him and the two begin a friendship, being raised as frost giants. During a hunt, Loki is nearly killed, but Thor uses his thunder powers to take down the beast, leading Loki's father to shame Loki but praise Thor. A heartbroken Loki finds comfort in talking to the imprisoned Freya, where she teaches him many tricks and fills his mind with images of Midgard. Meanwhile, Thor impresses the frost giant king and is made crown prince, earning the Ice Crusher hammer. Loki frees Freya and they escape to Asgard to attempt to flee to Midgard, but Thor and the king track them down. The king tries to kill Loki, but Loki stabs and kills him. Enraged, Thor turns on Loki, but Freya leaps in the way of his blast and is turned to ice instead. After a brutal battle, Thor relents and allows Loki to flee to Midgard while he stays to protect his kingdom, and Loki finds a home and a family in the Northlands. This was quite good, an interesting setting where the two different personalities end up leading them to reversed worlds and alignments. It's one I recommend, and sort of the reverse of that one What If Disney Plus show episode. What if magic became Sorcerer Supreme? Ileana turns away from friends and family and wanders the country, brutally taking down anyone that gets in her way. During one encounter, Strange stops her from ending a sicko and they fight, while Strange tries to determine what she even is. He finally traps her in his sanctum and insists she have lunch with him, where she introduces herself and tells him about her life spent in literal hell under the tutelage of Belasco before finally escaping. Strange offers to make her his apprentice, which she at first refuses, but then accepts, and she's trained in many forms of magic, most more positive than her lessons in hell. She has major difficulty in harnessing creation magic, but after Strange tells her to let go of her conditioning, she finally creates a soul staff, only for Belasco to finally track her down, Strange revealing he intentionally lured him here to end him. Ileana refuses to fight, thus the two sorcerers duel. Belasco nearly wins, but Ileana finally acts and kills him. The shock nearly kills her as well, but Strange pulls her away and tells her to let go of all her anger and self-loathing, finally getting her to release all her negative energy. Thus she fully accepts her role as future Sorcerer Supreme and Strange's ward. This is great, a fantastic other life for the ever-tormented Ileana. And it's fun to see Strange raised not just an apprentice, but for all intents and purposes a daughter. I'm not fond of the sketchy artwork, but the visuals get very creative. I enjoyed this one, and it's a good closer for Volume 13, though can anyone explain what's going on here? The miniseries Spider Shadow is considered part of the What If series despite not being an official volume. Peter doesn't originally check in with Reed to find out why his symbiote suit is acting up, thus he continues with it, proud of how it strengthens its crime-fighting abilities, but wary of how he never seems to get any sleep, and when he does, it's full of nightmares. Peter nearly kills Hobgoblin, barely pulling himself back, but is confronted by Felicia later. He finally meets with Reed to discover the suit is alive, but that one additional night was all that was needed to convince Peter he's fine with being bonded to it, refusing to get it removed. Peter checks in with Aunt May, but a vengeful Hobgoblin stalks him home and attacks both of them. Due to the symbiote's weakness to fire, it holds Peter back from saving May, and she dies in the house explosion. Thus, Peter, overcome with grief, crushes Hobgoblin. The incident is published in a Bugle, worrying Kingpin, who decides to take matters into his own hands. Peter violently confronts Jonah, warning him to never publish a story about him again. The Fantastic Four feverishly search for Peter, realizing the danger he's become and that the symbiote is close to permanently bonding. MJ discovers Peter's new look, and he tells her he's making all the decisions now before leaving, only to be ambushed by Shocker and Scorpion, whom he horrifically kills before tracking down and doing the same to Kingpin. Several villains and Jonah band together to take down Peter, but after the meeting, Doc Ock is assassinated by Eddie Brock, taking his arms and place on the team. They set an ambush in a rural area, drawing Peter in with the Beetle, whom Peter also kills. Mysterio tries to disorient Peter with his illusions, but the symbiote sees right through them and kills him. He then starts on the other villains, but Kraven senses he's scared of fire, and Jonah in the Spider Slayer outfit forces him into a burning barn, but Peter reveals who he is to Jonah, causing Jonah to have second thoughts and get Peter out of there. He rushes him home to MJ and Felicia, where the police are also waiting thanks to intel released by Kingpin before his death. They think the symbiote is gone, but it turns out to have survived and infiltrated Fantastic Four headquarters, possessing Reed and Ben and using Reed's technology to enhance its abilities. Peter and MJ escape and try to find Reed, only to discover the Baxter building surrounded by the symbiote. Peter works with the heroes who are trying to keep order and finally convinces them to let him help despite his reputation. The building lets him enter, MJ and Johnny also sneaking in, where they're attacked by Ben, who tires out Peter. Johnny eventually throws Ben out of the building before finding the symbiote Reed, who's using his intellect to clone itself and possess the heroes outside. Johnny and MJ confront them, who tell her Peter loves her and that's why she's in the way, and the two escape, Reed right behind them. The distraction allows Peter to recover and infiltrate Reed's lab, where he searches for something to destroy the symbiote. At Peter's request, the heroes head back to the lab, where Peter emerges and volunteers to permanently bond to the symbiote. It agrees, killing killing Reed for good measure and begins bonding with Peter again, only for it to be a disguised Johnny who roasts the symbiote once and for all. Peter turns himself in, but thanks to the testimonies of the other heroes is declared not guilty and is even inducted into the Fantastic Four. But as a final note, Kingpin is revealed to be alive and in possession of the final symbiote. This was awesome! Easily one of the best stories we've looked at. It's very theatrical, structured a lot like a movie with a variety of locations and the grand final act, with even the traditional Marvel mid-credits scene. You could argue a couple parts are too convenient and Peter probably gets off too lightly, but it's nice to see he does take responsibility, and as I've said before, any story that makes Jonas sympathetic is doing something right. Volume 14 covers possible heroic paths Miles Morales could have taken, and what if he became Captain America? Steve is never found, and the government decides to reboot the Super Soldier program, replicating the serum, which Miles' Uncle Aaron steals and hides in the fridge. Miles opens it thinking it's juice, and it gives him a similar physique to Steve's. He's inducted into the program, and years later becomes Captain America, going on S.H.I.E.L.D. missions with his uncle, who unfortunately dies during a Russian assignment. Later, Miles and Tiana, here taking the Falcon identity, assault an AIM site, but their target gets away. Back at S.H.I.E.L.D., Sam, here heading the agency, tells them their targets are the Prowler and the Grey Skull, who have stolen an object of immense power. After a character scene with Miles talking to his parents, revealing he and Tiana are dating, S.H.I.E.L.D. tracks the artifact to Oscorp, where Grey Skull and Prowler find and confront a handful of venomized soldiers, as well as Norman's final project, a transdimensional portal. They use the Cosmic Cube to power it, just as Miles and Tiana crash the party. They fight, but Tiana is knocked out, and it turns out Prowler is Uncle Aaron. He helps Miles fight back Grey Skull, then reveals he was immensely jealous Miles got the serum powers, and he spent years getting over it to trying to make something of himself, but realized he couldn't let Grey Skull use the portal. The portal is switched on, but Miles uses his shield to destroy the cube, also getting a look at his alternate selves before the portal melts down. All but Grey Skull survive, and the day appears to be saved, but Aaron shows up later and finds a cube fragment, revealing this is his plan all along. This is very good! A lot of fun, and a well-established universe where Miles as Captain America does seem possible, and I appreciate they took the time to show character development, especially since, like Peter, Miles has so much personality. Great story, great artwork, and a great start to this new volume. What if Miles Morales became Wolverine? A 1980s version of Miles and his family live in Atlanta, where a rash of child abductions have occurred. Miles shows signs of mutation, and as he goes for a walk, is also kidnapped. Many years later, Miles returns, hounded by Sentinels, which he handily dispatches with his adamantium claws. It gets the attention of Malcolm Concord, here heading S.H.I.E.L.D., where he instructs the mysterious Agent J to murder Miles. They meet and fight, and it's shown Agent J's suit is also made of adamantium, which shatters Miles' claws. Agent J stabs and electrocutes Miles, but when he sees Miles without his mask, he reveals he's actually Miles' father, who had been looking for Miles all his life. Concord speaks to a robot, revealing Miles and the other abducted children are taken to a facility and experimented on, Miles receiving a healing factor and the adamantium skeleton, and later escaping, horribly maiming Concord in the attempt. Concord has been hunting him ever since, and since Agent J won't do it, he sends in Sabretooth, this time played by Aaron, who was rescued from prison by Concord. He fatally attacks Miles' father, but Miles manages to grow back his original bone claws and stabs Aaron, but his father convinces him not to kill Aaron before passing on. Miles and Concord promise they will hunt each other down, and the X-Men appear, with Genki Lee as Professor X to recruit him. This was goofy, but in a good way. There's no reason to transplant Miles and his family into the 80s, especially since the rest of the story takes place in present day, but it's great artwork and great character-based writing. So what was Miles doing for 40 years anyway? What if Miles Morales became the Hulk? Aaron is recruited by Blonsky to steal a briefcase containing Banner's gamma experiment, threatening his family if he doesn't. He does and hides it in his room, where Miles enters to tell him about going to university. Miles sees a spider on the briefcase and tries to smash it, accidentally opening the case and triggering an explosion that irradiates him, giving him Hulk-like powers and physique. He's able to mostly control it, only telling and proving it right in front of Genki, who also helps him to keep it under control. He overhears Aaron scheduling a meetup and spies on him, handing the briefcase to Blonsky, who he then shoots for threatening his family. But dropping the briefcase causes a larger explosion that turns Blonsky into the Abomination, who kills Aaron, and full of rage, Miles transforms fully into the Hulk, killing Blonsky. And years later, he's joined the Avengers and is telling his story to Doc Samson, who tells him he's making great progress in accepting his role as a hero. This was simpler than the last two, but still enjoyable to read. It's interesting seeing an angsty teenager living with the risk of turning into the Hulk and the different triggers he has to deal with. And I like the framing device of Miles in therapy. I wish it was longer and we saw him actually joining the Avengers, but it's written well enough that it feels like a believable scenario. And I'm surprised they got away with mentioning Legos in their story. What if Miles Morales became Thor? In this reality, the tree Yggdrasil grew in Midgard instead, thus Earth develops as Asgard did, while still retaining its cultures and history. Here, Miles is actually the legendary Thor, while his friends fill the role of Thor's posse. He tells them about a celebration his father will be having that night, where we also see Loki, this time Thor's uncle and portrayed by Aaron, and Odin and Freya, portrayed by Miles' parents. Aaron takes Miles to the realm of the Frost Giants, saying he wants to show him something, and clearly being jealous, Miles is about to be announced as Odin's heir. Miles admits that he doesn't know if he wants to accept the responsibility when they're ambushed by Frost Giants. Aaron tells him not to hold back, and he seemingly kills the gang, the duo taking the skull of Laufey with them back home, where that night they present it as a gift for Odin. But it turns out to be a trick, and Aaron resurrects Laufey. Miles and Laufey fight, where Miles is frozen solid, Odin not interfering and saying if he can't free himself, he's not worthy to be considered his heir. Thus, Miles breaks free and wails on Laufey, finally launching him into the air and disintegrating him. Aaron is banished, telling Miles to never be a great leader, but secretly revealing he thinks he did Miles a favor. Later, Miles confides with Tiana about how he feels Odin will never forgive him when the previous three versions of Miles all appear to recruit him. This is the most creative of this volume, and one of the most interesting variations I've seen in the series. It is fascinating seeing Miles' universe adapted to work with Thor's universe, and how surprisingly well his family dynamics match Thor's own. I don't know how to judge the dialogue and portrayal since I don't follow this culture, so I won't, but I will say I thoroughly enjoyed this story. Oh wait, I forgot. Thor can't be portrayed by a black man. 0 out of 10, politically correct garbage. Nah, I'm kidding. What if Miles Morales? Main universe Miles and Genki are at a taco stand where they're ambushed by the three surviving alternate Aarons. They nearly kill Miles, but the alternate Miles also show up and fight back, revealing they've been following the Aarons across the multiverse as they try to track down an ultimate weapon. They prove a match, only for a blue Marvel variant of Aaron Aaron to also join and turn the tides. Miles and Captain America Miles follow Prowler Aaron back through the portal, where he steals Miles' web shooters that he uses to snatch the cosmic amplifier. Back in the main universe, he announces his intention to create a new reality where Aarons are finally allowed to be successful, though the strain will tear the multiverse apart. Thus, Miles Thor uses his hammer's power to overcharge Miles' Venom Blast, overloading the amplifier and shattering it, also sending the Aarons back to their own universes since it's no longer holding them. The Miles all tell each other they appreciated their help before they're sent back as well, and an exhausted Miles sleeps well on the fact that there are other variants of him keeping the multiverse safe. Fantastic ending to a fantastic volume. I loved seeing each variant of Miles and how their dialogue and attitudes were all different, yet still match their main series counterpart. I know stories with multiple spider people are cliche by this point, but I'm not fatigued enough to not enjoy this one. I didn't even really follow Miles before, but with this and his movies, he is now one of my favorite superheroes. This is one of the best miniseries to bear the What If name, and a much better team-up and ending than Volume 11, and these characters better show up in the next Spider-Verse films. What If Dark Loki starts Volume 15 and takes us way back to Thor issue 153, where Loki steals Thor's hammer and this time uses it to kill Thor and Sif. After gloating, he then uses it to destroy Karnilla, ensuring the power to wield it remains his. From his fortress, he plots the rest of his scheme before growing a mistletoe branch and using it to kill Balder, setting the events of Ragnarok in motion. He kills Odin's ravens, frees the Fenris Rolf, gathers the Frost Giants, tells Hela to raise the dead, and summons the Midgard Serpent before knocking out Heimdall and storming the gates of Asgard. Thus does Ragnarok truly begin, reducing Asgard to rubble while Fenris devours Odin and Loki declares himself master of all worlds. But he kind of forgot the part of the prophecy where Surtur draws his sword to end the universe, his hammer doing nothing to stop the fire giant. Loki tries to use the hammer's full power but can't handle it and incinerates himself. Thus Surtur uses his sword to destroy the Midgard Serpent, followed by all 9 worlds and ultimately the entire universe. However, the hammer remains, and after eons births a new universe. This is fine. Basically, Loki kills the Nordic universe with some very beautiful yet apocalyptic artwork that gives a finality to all things. And a great return for veteran comic writer and artist Walt Simonson. What If Dark Spider-Gwen? During the infamous Gwen incident, Peter manages to save Gwen, but Green Goblin cuts his web line, causing them to fall into the water. Gwen recovers, but Peter broke his neck in the fall, killing him. She takes off his costume and tells an altered story to the police to hide his identity, but keeps the mask for herself. After the funeral, everyone, including Jonah, give their condolences, but Gwen is clearly the most shaken up. She takes out Peter's apartment until Harry finally returns from his trip and lets her in, where she explores to learn more about Peter's double life. And after finding his equipment, convinces herself to take on his role, but quickly realizes she doesn't have the abilities or conditioning. Instead, she reveals Peter's identity to Harry and works with him to set a trap for Goblin. They lure him to a construction site where Goblin sees who he thinks is Peter and flies in, suddenly becoming entangled in a massive web bomb. Gwen pulls a gun on Goblin, but can't bring herself to use it, instead saying she'll honor Peter's legacy by keeping him alive, only for Harry to shoot Goblin instead. Goblin reveals he's Harry's father Norman, and Harry, blinded by rage, blames Gwen for his actions. A shocked Gwen grabs a gun before Harry can use it and runs away, disposing of the evidence. Gwen tries to forget about everything and go back to normal life, but discovers Harry has taken on the Green Goblin mantle. Thus, Gwen also adopts the spider persona to stop him. I'm actually getting tired of saying how good most of these Spider-Man stories are, since at least 2 out of 3 are the best of the entire series. I love how Gwen remains strong yet sensitive as she avenges Peter, while still reacting to everything in a very human way. And while she's not the actual Spider-Gwen, she is a Spider-Gwen, and it's interesting to think how she'll fill the role without powers. Definitely worth a read, though did they have to hire infamous porn tracer Greg Land to do the cover? What If Dark Venom? Ben visits the Baxter building shortly after Reed detached the symbiote from Peter. After a conversation with Reed that reawakens Ben's feelings of being a monster, the symbiote telepathically convinces him it can help. Thus he opens the capsule and is possessed, appearing to revert Ben back to his former self. Reed attempts to recapture it, but Ben destroys the sonic gun and storms off. He struts around town, thrilled to be seen as human, but the symbiote senses danger and reverts him back, just as the lizard emerges from the sewers. Ben starts to fight, but the lizard tries to appeal to Ben's condition, telling him they're not so different, and finally convincing Ben to allow him to experiment with the symbiote to use it to help people. He detaches the symbiote from Ben, keeping him trapped and revealing he's going to use the symbiote as revenge. He lets it possess him, then insults Reed and Sue in the Baxter building, killing both of them. Ben finally reverts back to his thing form, escaping his confinement and confronting Lizard, and in his shock and anger, he pushes them both out the window, the symbiote reattaching itself to Ben as they crash to the street below. Ben crushes Lizard's head and suggested Ben is fully bonded with his symbiote companion. This was a very powerfully emotional story, and you could just feel the many stages Ben goes through trying to regain a normal life, only to realize he was wrong and trying to atone before just giving up. All portrayed through some phenomenal artwork, including some of the most brutal kills I've seen in a mainstream Marvel comic. But if you have the stomach for it, this is a great read, and I like Ben's little spider costume the symbiote makes for him. What If Dark Moon Knight? While dueling with Bushman to rescue his girlfriend Marlene, Bushman goes back on his word and orders his mercenaries to kill them both. Marlene stands her ground but is shot in the arm, and the distraction allows Bushman to stab Mark. They get to the rescue copter, but Mark dies soon after. After the funeral, Marlene takes her anger out on a statue of Khonshu, but a statue out of Ra calls to her and makes her his avatar, going by the name Luminary. She uses her powers to bring light and hope to others while punishing those who seek to do harm. At a later art auction, she's met by a Burundian lieutenant who threatens her not to buy any art from his country. She calls him and Bushman hypocrites and attacks him, seemingly killing him, and literally burning with rage, she attacks the embassy, finally confronting Bushman as Luminary. They duel, Marlene blinding him, but Bushman manages to use the knife her father tried to use to kill him to stab her, she in turn using a blade of light followed by one of Mark's moonblades to finally finish him off. Marlene is extracted and given help but dies of her injuries, rejoining Mark in the afterlife, and thus does Ra take complete control of her now vacant body, turning into Luminary forever. I've never read a Moon Knight story before, but this was interesting. It was short and predictable and very similar to that previous Spider-Gwen story, but enjoyable. I liked Luminary, and I'm a little disappointed this was her only appearance. It's nothing life-changing, but it is worth a read, and maybe I'll check out the Disney Plus show sometime. What If Dark Carnage? Carnage escapes his cell at Ravencroft and ventures deeper and deeper into the institution, trying to find a way out while fleeing and killing the guards pursuing him. One launches a sonic bomb that stuns Carnage, but also causes the Foundation to crumble, dropping him into a cavern with an enormous tree. He finds an ancient corpse entangled in the trunk to discover it's still alive. It introduces itself as Cassidy's ancestor Cortland, telling him he's there to lead an army being prepared for him by Dormammu. Dormammu hears his name and investigates, revealing it's all his plan to finally invade the Earth realm once the space-time tree and his incubating demons have matured. The Ravencroft guards notice the disturbance and attack. Carnage runs, using the tree's roots to escape into the past, and Dormammu accelerates Cortland's metamorphosis, turning him into another Carnage and sending him to stop the interference. Carnage comes across a cult worshipping the Elder Gods, who call him an imposter and attack, but Carnage easily deals with each of them. Cortland catches up to him and nearly does him in, but Carnage stuns him before uprooting the tree, escaping back to his time before it crumbles. Cortland catches up again, but Carnage throws him through Dormammu's portal before it closes, trapping him with the angry deity. But when Carnage makes it back to Ravencroft, he's immediately stunned by weapons more accurate to capturing him, and it turns out he killed the ancestor of the previous security chief, causing him to never exist and this new one to be much more interested in Carnage's case, as he demonstrates by cruelly experimenting on him. This is an ugly, brutal comic, but wow is it exciting. I usually don't like sketchy artwork, but it's supposed to be horrific and surreal, so it fits perfectly, and it's hilarious how Carnage is inadvertently the hero just by being himself. Also how he does himself in. If you can handle it, I recommend this one. Oh, and is anyone gonna eat that arm? What if Dark Tomb of Dracula? Dracula goes to kill Harker, but wants a quick snack on the way there and tries to feast on the passing woman. He's attacked by Dr. Frost, whom he decides to feast on instead before getting back to business. Frost is turned vampiric, so when he's called to deliver the baby Blade, he attacks his mother before turning to mist and escaping. Most of the brothel women are killed, but Blade survives. Years later, Dracula hears of Blade's adeptness in vampire hunting and goes to finish him off himself. He's repelled by Harker's team, so he sends his vampiric army to attack an outdoor fair and lures Blade to a mall, where he finally turns Blade into a full vampire. But while Blade is forced to kill Saffron, his will is still too strong for Dracula, and he uses his new powers to chase after the vampire lord. He's nearly killed, but survives, convincing the team to take the battle to Dracula. Dracula makes it back home, ready to unleash his undead hordes on the world, only to reveal Blade has already killed them all. He and Dracula fight, Blade finally finishing Dracula for good, but he instructs the team to blow up the lair with him in it, making sure neither of them can resurrect and be a threat again. Yeah, I'm not into this one. Even as someone who's never followed the Blade comic series, I don't feel like much changed. Blade becomes a full vampire, but he's still in control somehow and does the exact same thing he usually does. And most of it is just retelling Blade's origins, except treating it like it's the Divergence for some reason. Also, too many oversized panels and not enough going on. Not a strong finish for this volume. Heck, I'll even watch Blade 3 over this. In a Divergence for the series, What If Aliens focuses on the Aliens franchise. Here, Burke is not immediately killed by the Xenomorph, but is knocked out and placed in the hive to the impregnated. The explosion from Gorman and Vasquez kills the facehugger and frees him, and he stealthily sneaks aboard the dropship, also witnessing Ripley taking on the Queen. Once everyone is in stasis and it's safe to emerge, he contacts the company to give an update. Since he failed his mission, Yutani refuses to dispatch a rescue, but knowing the danger Ripley potentially is, offers to save Burke if he makes sure all other survivors are dead. Burke still has some form of conscience, so instead loads them on an escape ship and ejects it towards a prison planet, then heads home. Years later, Burke continues his work, but the company pinned all the blame for the destruction of the colony on him and stuck him on a small mining asteroid where he's reviled by everyone, including his family. One day, a synthetic named Cygnus that Burke saved from the scrap heap returns after a long assignment, saying the mission was a success and showing Burke a xenomorph egg. He tries to reconnect with his daughter Bree, telling her things are going to change, but she wants nothing to do with him. Well, it's also revealed he has a wife in stasis with an incurable disease. Burke wants to use the xenomorph genes to get back in the company's good graces and formulate a cure for his wife, but needs to impregnate someone for it to mature. He interviews the staff to find the most expendable, but can't bring himself to inflict it on anyone. But a sleazy corporate representative named Hero arrives to fire him for multiple HR complaints, and Burke decides to use him. Hero begs for his life, revealing he's the least favorite son of Yutani and hates his father as much as Burke does, and he'll do anything to help. Thus, as the egg hatches, Burke last minute saves Hero, but can't stop the facehugger from crawling into the vents. The three run down to the mines where Bree works, and as Hero forms a friendship with her, Burke and Cygnus search for the alien. It nearly attaches to Burke, but Cygnus pulls it away and it scatters off, where it then attacks Bree and Hero, Bree barely managing to catch it in a loader arm. It escapes again, and the team search for it, Hero grabbing his own loader suit. They finally corner it, only for the elevator to open, and it finally attaches itself to Bree's supervisor Harold. Burke, considering this a success and still confident they can extract the embryo before it becomes a full chestburster. Hero and Bree have a scene together, bonding over how sucky their lives are, while Burke and Cygnus prepare to extract the embryo. Unfortunately, they didn't account for the kind of embryo, and it bursts out of Harold, a full-fledged queen, who slices Cygnus to shreds. Burke tries to get the remaining group off the asteroid, but can't risk the company finding out or killing Bree with her different air pressure, thus they're forced to suit up and stop the queen themselves. They track it into the warehouse, where it's already ensnared multiple workers and started its hive. They start their assault, only for Hero to betray them, saying bringing back a xenomorph queen might get him in his father's good graces. He knocks them out, and they wake up trapped in the hive, but luckily Bree burns them out with an emergency torch, escaping just as a multitude of xenomorphs emerge. Burke evacuates the offices, also revealing to Bree that her lungs can breathe Earth's atmosphere. He just told her otherwise so she wouldn't leave him. And he's been keeping her mother's status secret, who they both run to load her onto the escape ship, only to find her taken by Hero to be used as a host. And they inadvertently got most of the staff slaughtered, so Burke and Bree run to save the rest of them, Burke grabbing his rifle and Bree loading into a loader to take on the warriors. The queen reveals itself and the entire staff band together to take it down, Burke finally blowing off its head. The survivors load themselves into a mining freighter on a course for Earth, forging evidence that everything was the corporation's fault, and as the others get into stasis, Burke and Bree finally make amends and promise each other they'll make everything alright. This is really good, only held back by the fact we have to follow human garbage Burke. For some reason they changed him from someone not hesitant to kill the entire cast of aliens just to smuggle some eggs into a guy who says he won't kill if he doesn't have to, but he still for all intents and purposes killed Riley, and he's still fine with risking other people's lives for his own profit. Yeah, we're supposed to see him as a hero, but the story, pacing, and dialogue are good enough to keep me invested in the setting, and it feels like a story that actually needed 5 issues to tell. I had to leave a lot out of this video to make it a decent length, and I highly recommend you take a look for yourself. And with a little rewriting, it could work as a movie spin-off of the franchise. I mean, it couldn't be any worse than half the actual movies, am I right? Volume 16 is a mini-series exploring different hosts for Venom. First, an overworked and underappreciated Jen notices Eddie running into the church with a gun and stops him from offing himself. But as they talk, the symbiote possesses Jen, using her strength to cause chaos while causing her to forget their bonding every time they're done. It exhausts her, making it impossible impossible for her to work her office job while repeatedly taking her unconscious body for a joyride, and she eventually loses her job and becomes homeless, yet the possession continues for years. One night, Venom Jen is stopped from murdering a gang by Sabretooth, who fights her while using atomic belts to weaken them. He takes a sample of the symbiote and runs, Jen being held back from pursuing him. Jen is at the end of her rope, but is found by Moon Knight avatar Jake Lockley, and tells her he can help. Meanwhile, Sabretooth tries to sell the symbiote to the Triad, but Logan kills his contacts and ambushes him, and in the struggle he slices open the container and is possessed, Sabretooth revealing this is his plan all along. The symbiote locks Logan in his own mind as it rampages with his body, enjoying it more than Jen's, but through sheer strength and willpower, Logan breaks free, telling it he's going to be the one calling the shots, and is soon met by Moon Knight avatar Stephen Grant, who also tells him he can help. Meanwhile, Strange, looking into what the newspaper is calling a boogeyman, investigates where Logan and Sabretooth's brawl occurred to discover part of the symbiote disguising itself as the container. It leaps at him, and Strange seems to fend it off as he goes home and tells Wong he couldn't find it. Wong takes the night off when Strange is suddenly visited by Amora, who attempts to seduce him through magic, but changes her mind and attempts to kill Strange to take over his home. And it's revealed Strange's cloak was actually the symbiote, who tries to help Strange fight off Amora, but he freezes it and fights her himself. She turns out to be more than he planned for, thus he accepts the symbiote's help, and their combined magical abilities fend off Amora. But it takes advantage of Strange's trust and possesses him, nearly devouring Amora before she teleports out. It tries to fully take over Strange, but he banishes it out of him, then attempts to keep it contained, only for it to sneak up and take him over again. He tries bargaining with it, but Moon Knight avatar Mark Spector shows up to take him to Moon Knight headquarters, where he can hopefully help and get help. Meanwhile, Moon Knight is bombarded with nightmares and hallucinations involving a dark, shadowy figure who seems to possess both him and his god Khonshu. And it turns out to be Loki, who is somehow also possessed by symbiote and who appears to somehow kill Khonshu. And this was all his plan to get the symbiote's fragment together, and the avatars we saw were fake, who had the heroes locked in the mission's basement, including a possessed Khonshu, maybe? Moon Knight gathers his actual avatars together, and they all face off against the venomized Loki, revealing Moon Knight has also been venomized, but he's not under the other's control for some reason, and stuns the symbiote long enough to detach it from Loki and free the heroes. Strange imprisons the fragments, and S.H.I.E.L.D. suddenly shows up to take Loki and the symbiote into custody, and it ends with Jen being hired as Moon Knight's legal advisor. I wasn't hugely impressed with this story from the start, especially with how padded it feels to make a page count, but I like the heroes reacting to it in their unique ways, and it did keep my attention for the first 3 issues. But then we get to Moon Knight, and it completely loses me and becomes an incoherent mess. I was mostly just guessing at what was going on for the finale, and I have no idea why Loki is suddenly here and possessed by a symbiote. I don't even know why this is a what if. It could have easily been a main story where it detaches from the current Venom and goes hero hopping, especially since it takes years for the story to get from that moment in the church to the modern era it takes place in. This one just makes my brain hurt, and is one I unfortunately have to recommend you skip. Literally any other Venom story we've already covered is more worth your time than this one. Volume 17 explores different heralds for Galactus. First, after losing Silver Surfer, Galactus recruits Bruce, who figures it would be a healthy role for both he and the Hulk to take on. He targets planets for Galactus to consume, even giving them ample time to scrounge together escape ships of his own design, but on a Kree planet is stopped by the Avengers. They tell him to stop and help them defeat Galactus, and Bruce attacks them. He knocks out Carol and Vision, while Tony grabs his new and improved Hulkbuster armor, but even that's ultimately no match for Hulk, and Tony is defeated. But in the battle, the escape ship is accidentally destroyed, leaving the Kree stranded. Tony admits they're the ones who suggested Galactus should recruit Bruce to keep him under control, but sees that he still hasn't found it, but he can oppose Galactus and save the planet, and Hulk flies off to confront Galactus. Next, shortly after he was manipulated by Sinister to massacre the Morlocks, Galactus grants Remy the power of the Herald. But instead of taking the role, he escapes to get revenge on his oppressors. Galactus sends legions of Punisher robots after him, but he uses his enhanced abilities to repel all of them, so Galactus puts him in his place himself and orders Remy to steal a planet obtained by the Collector. He crashes the party and charms his way into the Collector's vaults, where he finds the planet, which turns out to be Galactus' homeworld when Galactus was still mortal in the previous universe, that the Collector somehow managed to perfectly recreate. Collector refuses to give it up, thus Remy blows up most of his ship and collection and even freezes him in place. Galactus arrives through the world, but Remy reveals it's a fake, a practical joke by the Collector, and an enraged Galactus traps Collector in his own vaults for eternity. He frees Remy from servitude, and Remy goes to create his own planet. Next, Galactus tries to recruit Khonshu the Moon God, but he refuses and Galactus kills him. In his last moments, Khonshu transports Moon Knight, telling him to avenge him. Galactus is also present and tells him to convince him to spare Earth, Moon Knight saying he'll be his herald and lead him to a much larger feast, and Galactus agrees. Moon Knight aimlessly wanders the universe trying to figure out how to keep his promise when he's ambushed by the former heralds of Galactus. They attack, but Moon Knight fights back, barely able to keep a coherent mind thanks to his shattered psyche. He escapes and finds that while he tried to figure out his powers, Galactus has devoured Earth and is ready to devour him. He's unable to defend himself, and when the former heralds arrive to back him up, they're dealt with as well. However, Moon Knight is able to pull himself together just long enough to prove a match for Galactus, who flees the area, with Moon Knight knowing his work has just begun. Next, Silver finally tires of Galactus devouring planets with life and quits, thus Galactus knocks him out and sends him hurtling to Earth, where he crashes right outside a young rogue's farm. She attempts CPR, discovering her mutant abilities for the first time and absorbing Silver's memories and abilities. She goes to confront Galactus, with many mutants sensing history has been changed, and taunts him, telling him she won't obey. He finally catches her and she relents, but vows to be bad at it. She leads him to a world of giant dragons, hoping they'll hurt him, but they don't, and an angry Galactus punches her through the walls of the Watcher's outpost. Who tells her that Galactus devouring planets leaves residual energy that creates new life, but Rogue refuses to see the big picture and wants to focus on individual life, threatening to drain Galactus of his power, who allows her to see a fraction of his mind. Confirming the Watcher is right, and without him the universe would entropy. Thus she reluctantly accepts her role, but convinces him to spare at least 2 of every inhabitant to preserve their culture in a literal cosmic arc. Finally, Gwen is traveling the multiverse when she ends up in the middle of the battle between Galactus and his rebellious herald Stardust. She confronts him, telling him she'll take their place, and he agrees. She serves her role trying to find planets with as little life as possible, but on one planet is suddenly attacked by dragons, whom she fights off with the aid of a medieval fantasy-style troupe. She's taken back to their village, where she relates with the story of one of them who lost a dear friend, and is encouraged to try to stop Galactus from devouring the planet. They bring her to someone they think can help, who turned out to be the Sorcerer Supreme Nina, who uses her magic to enlist the dragons to their cause, and it ends with the world uniting in battle against the cosmic being. These were fine. I like issue issue foremost, but they're all interesting takes on the idea from a multitude of writer and character viewpoints. They don't stand out much, but are entertaining enough for one read, and to bundle with the other instances in the series, Galactus has chosen alternate heralds. Quasar number 30 isn't part of the What If series, but does feature a trip through it. After events pertaining to his series, Wendell meets the Watcher in his security firm's waiting room, who tells him to meet him on the moon as Quasar. Once there, Watu tells Wendell that the living laser used his interdimensional portal to escape into another reality, where he teamed up with an alternate version of himself. However, that version got lost on the way back, and is now universe hopping and messing up their continuities, and if this continues, the Timekeepers will confiscate his portal. Watu's oath means he can't interfere, thus Wendell has to go through each tainted universe and neutralize each one's living laser. He agrees and starts his journey, first entering the reality scene in Volume 1, Issue 32, where he quickly absorbs laser and travels back before Korvac vaporizes the universe. He then does the same for the universes from Volume 2, Issues 1, 4, 14, 24, and one of the stories where Phoenix destroyed everything. He's tempted to help his alternate self from Volume 2, Issue 25, but holds back and flies into the final universe, where he witnesses this variant's Watcher and his portal explode in a giant blast. He searches for the cause, finding Thanos and Maelstrom fighting over the sun, in a reality original to this story. He tries to escape, but Maelstrom sees him and fires an energy bolt, messing up his teleportation and sending him into the new universe, where his future adventures take place. This was fun, sure, it's just an advertisement for the What If series, but I like that these universes got another shot at attention. If I'd known this existed, I would have used this to close out my look through Volume 2, and it's clever to use an existing multiversal series to stir up sales for Marvel's new universe, even if it ultimately didn't save the Doom series. Trial of the Watcher is another story following the What If structure, but not considered part of the series. During the Reckoning War event, Watu was put on trial for suggesting the Watchers stop the Reckoning. He's placed in the seat of all knowledge and chided for all the times he indirectly aided heroes while still insisting he was never directly involved. He's also scolded for wasting his time cruising alternate realities, and is forced to witness a reality where he never helped at all. During the first appearance of Galactus, Watu never tries to hide the Earth or alert the Fantastic Four. Reed learns of the incoming force through Fury and discovers Silver Surfer through his telescope. Silver lands near the group but try to make first contact, but Silver brushes them off with an insult, making Ben punch him across the city. Galactus arrives shortly after, announcing his intentions to consume the planet and blowing the heroes away when they try to attack. Reed infiltrates Galactus' machine to study it, also telling Fury to begin evacuating the city, while the rest of the team try to distract Galactus. He strikes Sue blind, also sending a Punisher robot after Ben, while Silver recovers and attacks Johnny going supernova and stunning both of them. As Fury evacuates everyone, Galactus completes his machine, beginning his meal, but at the last minute, a melting Reed discovers how to reverse the process, building his own ultimate nullifier and vaporizing Galactus. The team emerged maimed but alive, and Silver flies away, ecstatic that he's free, and in the aftermath, Reed uses the new energy to reshape the world into a utopia. Watu is horrified to learn all this, and as his punishment, is forced to watch this reality forever on a loop. The other Watchers dismiss Watu's warnings, while Fury enters to play his part. This is fantastic, a great alternate chain of events from that famous moment, and you do feel Watu's horror as he sees his actions were all for nothing. Absolutely worth the read, and if you recognize all these variants, you're officially a nerd. To celebrate his 50th anniversary, Howard the Duck was given his own What If-like feature. Howard and Terra wander during a future world-ending crossover event where they discover the Peeper, Watu's not a successful cousin. Howard asks if he can find something to stop the war, thus Peeper searches for alternate outcomes in Howard's life. First, Howard actually wins that time he ran for president. As he and Beverly get used to their surroundings, Howard is called into the Situation Room, where he witnesses the heroes of the world disappear. Outside, aliens called the Focus Group arrived in projector-shaped spaceships, who have captured the heroes and seek Howard's permission to convert them into signals and broadcast their stories across the universe. Howard agrees as long as he's shown the converter dubbed the Conformatron, but when he learns they'll be made into the most profitable, least controversial forms of themselves, he reneges, allowing his Omega Vice President to fry the aliens and save the heroes. Howard resigning the next day. Next, Howard argues that he has it worse than Proteus, so Proteus turns him into a mutant, causing him to be picked up by Cerebro and inducted into the X-Men. But he's soon demoted into the New Mutants. He encourages them to use their powers to stand up for themselves and is noticed by Emma, who invites them into her group, but he declines. Years pass and he gets used to his new life, only for Proteus to reappear and take away his abilities, and he's exiled from the team. Finally, Howard decides to stay with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and his attitude drives Star-Lord away, making him the new Star-Lord. The team grow tired of all the pet rescuing, so they decide to solve the case of disappearing planets, finding it's the work of Lib Beaver and his team, who have been preserving planets to prevent them from colonization. Howard sides with them, and the Guardians are finally fed up, sending the villains and Howard back to Earth. And main universe Howard and Terra decree the whole thing a waste of time and leave, but not before revealing Howard is actually a real duck in a cyborg body. This is funny, and even if you like Me Don't Follow Howard, you'll have a good time, more than his movie will give you. What if Donald Duck became Wolverine? Pete Skull has stolen the weapons of the heroes of the city of Duckburg, leaving them powerless and allowing his Beagle Boy goons to run rampant. The heroes have retreated, including Donald Wolverine, who's comfortable living as a sponge on Grandma Duck's farm. Mickey Hawkeye shows up to recruit Donald in his quest to get the weapons back. Donald refuses, but Mickey says his temper is the most powerful he's ever seen, as shown in a flashback where he tears up Gyro's lab at the slightest provocation, and he proves he can still be a capable hero when given the right motivation. As they eat pie, Mickey reminds him of the glory days, and Donald is finally convinced to help, though a little less so after learning Goofy Hulk is helping them. Still sore that one time he woke him up to ask a stupid question, and since then Donald has had an issue with the color green, hence why Goofy has painted himself gray. They make it a Scrooge's money bin now being used as Pete Skull's headquarters, where they're immediately captured and taken to him. But this is all Mickey's plan, as Goofy breaks their chains, allowing Mickey to shoot a green painted arrow that covers everything and causes Donald to go berserk. Pete and his minions are defeated and arrested, and the day is saved. But since Donald also destroyed all the green money bills in his rampage, he's indebted to Scrooge for a very long time. This is fun, a lot better than I thought it would be. It's drawn well and clearly written with love for these characters and their histories, and it is fun seeing Donald transplanted into Logan's life. The dialogue's maybe too overwritten for Donald, and it sounds awkward if you read it in his voice, but that's mostly a nitpick. It's a good read, and if you like Disney comics, you'll probably like this too. Also, I'm no pastry chef, but I'm pretty sure that's cake, not pie. What if Donald Duck became Thor? Donald takes his nephews to an archaeological dig to earn their junior woodchuck badge. Donald injures his foot while digging and leaves to go sit down, unaware that the stone ducks from Saturn have landed nearby. He stumbles across them planning to conquer Earth and turning everything to stone, and is noticed as he tries to sneak away. He runs into a nearby cave and finds himself trapped by a boulder. He picks up a nearby stick to use as a lever, and when that fails, he hits it against the rock, turning it into Mjolnir and Hyrm into Thor. He uses his powers to escape, learning that he'll revert back to Donald if he lets go of the hammer for a minute, and takes time to test out his new powers. Once he's satisfied, he heads back to the aliens to see the invasion completely underway, even scaring off the Air Force with a dragon illusion. As they start terraforming the planet, Donald intervenes, fighting them back with his hammer, but ends up spinning spinning it so fast he loses control and is imprisoned. He quickly breaks free, and as a last resort, they bring out a giant robot dubbed the World Destroyer, which Donald appears powerless against. But it turns out the robot rusts easily and a rainstorm does it in, the invaders fleeing in terror. And later, Donald and his nephews head home, the nephews not believing Donald's claim that he's Thor. This is fine, mostly a scene-for-scene comedy retelling of Thor's original origin story, but for the younger audience it's clearly aimed at, it's enjoyable. Though given Donald's dialogue and some leftover artifacts in a couple panels, I get the impression this was originally written for Scrooge McDuck and changed at the last minute, possibly to get more sales. But whatever the case, this is cute and worth a read. Also, given the name and design, I'm pretty sure the robot is a stealth appearance for Galactus. What if Minnie became Captain Marvel? When the heroic Captain Marvel shows up in Duckburg, Scrooge, the head of the Chronicle newspaper, assigns new hire Minnie to discover the identity of the new hero. A week later, she's come up with nothing, save for some mysterious sudden dizzy spells. She goes to tell Scrooge the bad news when Peg-Leg Scorpion bursts into his office. Scrooge tries to flee, even using heavy greeting to defend himself, but Scorpion is too strong. Just then, Captain Marvel appears and defends against the villain, breaking off the tip of his tail before pouring hot coffee into it, forcing him to flee. Marvel flies away despite Scrooge threatening to bill her for the damage, and Minnie happens to show back up, having no memory of what just happened. A disgusted Scrooge takes some time off in his money bin, only for it to come under attack by a giant robot piloted by the Beagle Boys. He calls the newspaper and demands Minnie arrive to interview Marvel when she shows up, only for her to get another dizzy spell and for Marvel to take out the robot. Scrooge calling out for Minnie triggers a flashback where Minnie is hurrying to her job interview. She arrives to see Scrooge being attacked by Magica and dives to save his lucky dime, getting struck by a magic blast in the process. Magica leaves and Minnie gets the job, but later starts getting her dizzy spells, and in the present, she finally realizes she's both Minnie and Captain Marvel. Thus, after finishing with the Beagle Boys, writes up an interview that Minnie turns in to impress Scrooge. This is one of the best of these Marvel Disney crossovers, with great artwork and a fleshed out story, and I'm glad Minnie is written as a character and not just a symbol. Definitely worth your time, and apparently this is J. Jonah Jameson's Stuxona. What if Mickey and friends became the Fantastic Four? The signal is shot into the sky, and the team gather, with Minnie as Invisible Woman, Donald as Thing, Goofy as Torch, and Mickey as Mr. Fantastic. It's revealed that Gyro attempted to attract cosmic rays that would allow him to change the flavor of cauliflower, but they're sent the way of a nearby amusement park where the group are struck by them while on a rocket ship ride. The ship breaks off and crashes, where each hero's powers manifest similarly to the original teams. Back in the present, the team are alerted to the fact buildings are disappearing underground, and they gather at the most recent theft, where they're attacked by a dragon creature. They fend it off but fall into the pit, where Mickey and Goofy find themselves at the feet of Molpe. He reveals to try to steal Gyro's inventions, but only got a radio before being detected, and while pursued, he ran into a cave that turned out to be a tunnel to deep inside the earth. He found himself surrounded by monsters, but a song on the radio gave him the ability to banish them. And as thanks, the underground civilization appointed him their leader, and thus he's been using the earthquake powers to gain revenge on the places that have humiliated him. The team reunites, and Pete summons the monsters back. They handily defeat the beast, and Pete tries to flee, only to be stopped by Mickey and Minnie, who take Pete away and make the inhabitants promise no more earthquakes. Another major standout in the series, and a cute way to mash the original origin story with Disney elements, including the fairly obscure Terry Fermion seen in Scrooge McDuck media, and a rare instance of getting Donald to wear some pants. What if Mickey and friends became the Avengers? Gladstone Loki sulks in exile after his lottery prizes fell on Scrooge Odin, and seeks revenge on Donald Thor for telling on him. He sees Donald Thor and Daisy Seif on a date at the town's bicentennial, where he hypnotizes a nearby Goofy Hulk into thinking a cake is a monster and absconding with it. An alert goes out and multiple heroes gather, including Donald Thor, Daisy Seif, Minnie Wasp, Pluto Ant-Man, and Mickey Iron Man. Gladstone lures Donald to Duxguard by projecting an illusion of Goofy, where he creates a wooden army that Donald quickly takes down. Meanwhile, the other heroes arrive in the park, where Daisy explains the situation to them, and they begin their search for Goofy, using Minnie's ants to find him in the middle of nowhere. He tells them he was hypnotized, but he's fine now, while Donald appears and tells them Gladstone has been taken care of. Excited by the events, the heroes decide to join together to take on future threats and form the Avengers. Yeah, not the best one out of these. Compared to the others, it feels at least like a complete story and more an excuse to show the Disney characters as Marvel heroes. I thought they make a joke pointing out that half of them didn't even do anything, but it lacks that self-awareness. And while I'm glad they're trying for inclusiveness, seeing dark-skinned ducks just looks uncomfortable. What if Donald Duck became Iron Man? On his way to a date with Daisy, Donald stops by Gyro's lab to pick up plans for a literal gold digger for Uncle Scrooge. Gyro can't find where he put them, but hands him a flash drive containing all his schematics, which is overheard by the Beagle Boys, who abduct Donald and hide him in an ice cream cart. He wakes up in an abandoned warehouse, where the Beagle Boys demand he build them the drill in a very short amount of time. Donald, of course, doesn't want to help them and quickly pours through the flash drive to find something that can help him, stumbling across Gyro's plans for a suit of gardening armor, and as the Beagle Boys take a nap, cobbles together his own Iron Man suit, which he then demonstrates as he uses its long hair abilities to take down the gang. He hands them off to Scrooge, even getting a small reward before rushing to his date, using his suit to take Daisy to Paris. Unfortunately, in his rush, he forgot to install a way to remove the armor, thus cuddle time is out of the question. This is fun, another great merging of the Disney and Marvel universes. I appreciate that they realized the overlooked fact that Donald is not an idiot and can be inventive when the situation demands it. And I like how the armor retains the traditional Iron Man abilities, just adjusted so it's also adept at gardening. Great read, though why did he create a suit with iron nipples? What if Goofy became Spider-Man? Goofy is a college student living with his Aunt Tessie, where he shows a borderline unhealthy interest in etymology. One day he discovers a new species of spider in his attic and brings it to Gyro, but it escapes and jumps into the beam of an atomic transference ray before biting Goofy. On his way home, Goofy is nearly hit by a car and instinctively leaps away, where he finds he can stick to any surface and crush iron like paper. He overhears his aunt lament that she can't pay the mortgage and may have to sell Uncle Ben, who in this case is a motorcycle. Instead, Goofy constructs a costume and web shooters and signs up for a talent show, where he proves his incredible strength and other abilities. But as he enamors the crowd, the Beagle Boys use the distraction to steal the prize money, and Goofy is too wrapped up in the moment to pursue them. Later, he arrives home to find the Beagle Boys had stolen Uncle Ben as a getaway vehicle, and as he searches for them, he finds they also wrecked it. An enraged Goofy finds and webs up the gang, then hurries back to his aunt, where an art collector buys the totaled Uncle Ben for a lot of money, and their problems are over. Yeah, this one doesn't work. The humor doesn't fit with Spider-Man's tragic origin story, nor does casting Goofy as one of the smartest heroes in Marvel. It just feels tone-deaf and out of character trying to make these conflicting elements work together. I guess it's funny this Uncle Ben is a motorcycle, but it means Goofy doesn't learn anything since because he screwed up, they're now rich. Out of all these mashups so far, this is easily the worst. Just don't bother with this one. Besides, Spider-Ham will always be the definitive parody.